Chapter 114. Early the next morning, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi packed their luggage and prepared to continue their journey. As for what happened last night, neither of them mentioned it again. It's been a peaceful night. Did I see wrongly? Qin Xuan stood on a branch and looked at the tree hole in front of him with some doubts in his heart. Last night, he clearly saw a pair of blood-red eyes appear behind Lu Zi and then suddenly disappear. He thought that something would happen last night, so he didn't dare to sleep. But in the end, nothing happened last night. In this way, he really did deliberately scare Lu Zi and wanted to take advantage of Lu Zi. I'm really wronged. Qin Xuan glanced at Lu Zi, who was wiping her cheeks with a wet towel, and said, "Are all girls like you? Do you have to bring a towel to wipe your face when you go out?" "Of course," Lu Zi replied. "Wipe your face. Not only is it clean, but it also looks energetic." With that, Lu Zi handed the towel to Qin Xuan and said, "You should also wipe your face." "Forget it, I'm not used to it." Qin Xuan shook his head and refused. He had stayed in the Cloud Dragon Mountain range for 3 months, and the number of times he washed his face could be counted on one hand. He had long been used to this feeling. After the two had a simple breakfast, they set off again. With their speed in the mountain forest, it would take at least 20 days to reach the blue ancient city in the center of the Black Moon Mountain range. This was under the condition that there was no delay. The specific time should be longer. As they gradually went deeper into the Black Moon Mountain range, the two began to gradually encounter some fierce beasts. Compared to the wild beasts that had no intelligence, these fierce beasts were much smarter. They would not rashly attack Qin Xuan and Lu Zi. Instead, they would carefully observe the two of them first. "That wolf has been following us for almost 2 hours. Lu Zi frowned slightly and said to Qin Xuan, "Why don't we kill it directly? It's not appropriate." Qin Xuan shook his head gently and said, "There is more than one fierce beast lurking around us. Once we make a move and expose our strength, those fierce beasts will inevitably be afraid of us again. Maybe they will gang up and attack us. At that time, I'm afraid we will have to spend some effort to escape. If these fierce beasts are willing to follow us, then let them follow us. As long as they don't attack us, they won't hinder us." "What you said makes a bit of sense." Lu Zi thought for a moment and felt that Qin Xuan was right. Unknown enemy was the most terrifying. Once they made a move, and these fierce beasts perceived that they were not much threat. Just as Qin Xuan expected, although these fierce beasts had been secretly observing them, none of them really planned to make a move. They were all waiting for the other fierce beasts to make the first move to test Qin Xuan and Lu Zi's strength. They wanted to take advantage of the situation. However, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi dealt with changes by remaining unchanged, making these fierce beasts feel that they did not know where to start. Vaguely, these fierce beasts had become Qin Xuan and Lu Zi's bodyguards. With them by their side, no other fierce beasts dared to have any ideas about Qin Xuan and Lu Zi. However, most of the fierce beasts were territorial. When they realized that there was no suitable time to make a move, they began to retreat one by one. Not long after, the fierce beasts that were watching Qin Xuan and Lu Zi changed groups of fierce beasts. However, none of the fierce beasts made the first move. This silence lasted until noon. "Let's take a break." Qin Xuan took out a blanket and spread it on the lawn. He said to Lu Zi, "We should eat, but before that, let's deal with these fierce beasts first." They had been in a hurry just now, and these fierce beasts did not make a move easily because they were afraid of them. However, now that they had stopped and were about to start eating, the fierce beasts who had been hungry for the whole morning might not be able to hold back anymore. At this time, they needed to shift the conflict away. Lu Zi looked at Qin Xuan curiously and asked, "What are you going to do? Do you need my help? I can solve this small matter myself." Qin Xuan smiled slightly and walked toward the huge wild boar behind them. Although there was a saying that one should pick the soft persimmon to pinch, Qin Xuan decided to pinch the hardest one. "Friend, those brothers must be tired after following us all the way. I'll have to trouble you to provide them with some food." Qin Xuan looked at the fierce fangs of the wild boar and grinned. Then he suddenly exerted strength in his legs and took the initiative to pounce on the wild boar. Oh, following the wailing of the wild boar, Qin Xuan, whose body was stained with blood, returned to Lu Zi's side with a huge wild boar leg in his hand. He smiled and said, "How about we have barbecued meat for lunch today? I have no objections." Lu Zi saw that Qin Xuan was not injured and smiled. "I'll have to trouble head Chef Qin." While Qin Xuan was dealing with the boar's leg, a huge battle broke out at the spot where the wild boar had died. When the surrounding ferocious beasts saw that Qin Xuan had slaughtered the powerful wild boar, they breathed in the scent of blood in the air. Finally, they could no longer hold themselves back as they dashed towards the wild boar's corpse and started an intense battle to snatch it. Hearing the sounds of battle from not far away, Lu Zi said to Qin Xuan with a sigh, "Right now, it's just some fierce beasts. We can still deal with them. When we meet the demonic beasts later, that's when the real trouble begins." "You're right, but we've already come this far. We can't just go back the way we came, right?" Qin Xuan chuckled and said to Lu Zi, "We roar." Suddenly, a roar came from the mountain not far away. Following that, a dangerous aura spread through the forest. "It's the demonic beasts." Qin Xuan looked in the direction of the aura with a serious expression and said, "The fierce beasts fighting and the smell of blood from the wild boar have attracted the demonic beasts. We're still in the periphery. How do we meet the demonic beasts?" Lu Zi's face was also a little ugly. They had just said that encountering the demonic beasts would be the start of the real trouble. Who would have thought that they would encounter one so quickly? "Let's go." He didn't want the wild boar leg anymore. Qin Xuan casually threw the wild boar leg away, packed up his things, and ran in the opposite direction of the demonic beast with LVZ. They tried their best to distance themselves from the demonic beast. Although they had some powerful one-time use magical tools and might not lose to the demonic beasts, it was best if they could avoid a collision. Woo woo woo. Right at this moment, Qin Xuan suddenly heard a strange gust of wind. He subconsciously glanced at LVZ beside him, and he actually saw that pair of red eyes again. Bloody, ferocious, murderous, and cruel eyes. Chapter 115. Be careful. Almost subconsciously, Qin Xuan suddenly reached out and grabbed Lu Zi's arm, forcefully pulling Lu Zi to the other side of him. At the same time, the pair of blood-red eyes used an extremely strange gaze to stare deeply at Qin Xuan, and then disappeared. "What's wrong?" Lu Zi somewhat nervously asked Qin Xuan. "Could it be that the demon beast has caught up with us?" Her perception was weaker than Qin Xuan's, so she didn't notice the appearance of a demon beast nearby. "It's not a demon beast, it's the pair of red eyes from last night." Qin Xuan's expression was solemn, and his voice was extremely low as he said to Lu Zi, "It appeared again." Hearing this, Lu Zi immediately understood. Qin Xuan was talking about the incident that happened last night in the tree hole, but she didn't know that the pair of red eyes that appeared behind her back at that time was actually a pair of red eyes. Just thinking about that scene made her feel a little scared. "You're not lying to me. Are you deliberately taking advantage of me?" Lu Zi somewhat apprehensively looked around, but she didn't see the red eyes that Qin Xuan mentioned. "Of course I'm not lying to you." Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said to Lu Zi, "Let's continue walking." For the sake of safety, this time Qin Xuan took the initiative to hold Lu Zi's hand tightly. Along the way, he had been carefully observing Lu Zi's surroundings, but he didn't see the red eyes appear again. After increasing the distance between them and the demon beast and arriving at a safe place, Qin Xuan stopped and said to Lu Zi with a serious face, "I'm sure that you've been targeted by something. Don't scare me." At this time, Lu Zi's performance was no different from an ordinary girl, filled with fear towards the unknown, strange existence. "Nothing happened last night. I thought I was hallucinating, but this time, I'm sure it wasn't a hallucination." Qin Xuan asked Lu Zi very seriously, "When you were outside the Black Moon Mountains, did you encounter such a situation?" "No." Lu Zi shook her head and said, "I was fine when I was outside." It seems that this matter might be related to the Black Moon Mountain range. Qin Xuan frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he slowly voiced his speculation. "Perhaps it has something to do with the legendary mountain ghosts." "You mean to say that I've been targeted by a mountain ghost?" Lu Zi was shocked. She didn't doubt the authenticity of Qin Chuan's words. However, according to legend, mountain ghosts could only appear at night. Why would Qin Chuan see a mountain ghost appear beside her during the day? It's just a guess. I can't be sure. Qin Chuan looked around and said to Lu Zi, "For the rest of the time, let's not be separated. I'm worried that you'll be in danger." Okay, Lu Zi nodded. In a situation where she wasn't sure what was targeting her, staying with Qin Chuan made her feel at ease. Rest for a while, then we'll continue on our way. After eating, Qin Chuan simply identified the direction and continued on with Lu Zi. Soon, the afternoon passed and darkness fell again. This time, Qin Chuan wasn't lucky enough to find the tree hole. He and Lu Zi could only spend the night in the wilderness. Because of what happened at noon, Lu Zi had been holding Qin Chuan's hand tightly, unwilling to let go for a moment. "Qin Chuan, why do I feel like I'm scared by your ghost story?" Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan, who was sitting beside her, and whispered, "If I find out that you're lying to me, you're dead." "I'm really not lying to you." Qin Chuan smiled bitterly. He really didn't need to joke about this kind of thing. "Then you, Qin Chuan," Lu Zi suddenly exclaimed. In the darkness, there was a pair of blood-red eyes beside Qin Chuan's face. Almost at the same time that Lu Zi exclaimed, Qin Chuan subconsciously swung his fist to the side of his body. His fist seemed to have hit something soft, and the force was dispersed in an instant. Qin Chuan pulled Lu Zi and quickly left the place. His gaze was vigilant as he looked at the pair of blood-red eyes floating in the darkness. His voice was incomparably solemn as he said to Lu Zi, "You saw it too. I'm not lying to you. What should we do now?" After seeing the pair of blood-red eyes, Lu Zi calmed down. She took out a black ball from her pocket and said to Qin Chuan, "No matter what this thing is, use a magic weapon to get rid of it." At this moment, the pair of blood-red eyes seemed to have sensed a dangerous aura. A mouth full of sharp teeth suddenly opened below it. Following that, a tall and thin figure slowly appeared in front of Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. Looking at the scarlet tongue that kept rolling around, even Qin Chuan, who was mentally strong, couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. He never thought that this damn thing was actually a humanoid creature, but yesterday in the tree hole, he clearly didn't see the existence of a body. This should be a mountain ghost. Qin Chuan took a deep look at this strange creature and said in a deep voice, "Be careful." "Qin Chuan, look at its ears." Lu Zi seemed to have discovered something special and was extremely shocked. Qin Chuan heard her and subconsciously glanced at the ears of this suspected mountain ghost creature. It was a pair of long and pointed ears. They looked exceptionally familiar. Lu Zi swallowed her saliva and said to Qin Chuan, "Look at these ears. Don't they look like the ears of the elf that the waiter in the sky disguised as?" "Are you trying to tell me that this thing is an elf?" Qin Chuan found it hard to accept. From what he knew, elves were kind, pure, and cute existences. How could this black, ghost-like thing be an elf? "Don't tell me it doesn't caw 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 caw." Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound like a crow's caw came from the mountain ghost's mouth, causing Qin Chuan and Lu Zi to reveal pained expressions. Their faces instantly turned pale. In a moment of desperation, Lu Zi did not hesitate to throw the black ball in her hand at the mountain ghost. The black ball suddenly exploded after approaching the mountain ghost, releasing an extremely scorching flame attack that landed on the mountain ghost body. However, this attack did not cause any damage to the mountain ghost and was strangely absorbed by the mountain ghost body. Seeing this scene, Lu Zi was extremely shocked. At this moment, the mountain ghost finally made a new move. It suddenly pounced at Lu Zi on all fours like a wild beast. Qin Chuan pushed away LVZ, who had yet to recover from her shock, and then fiercely smashed his fist into the mountain ghost's face. That powerful force seemed to have landed on a pile of cotton, and it didn't have any effect at all. Chapter 116. The hill ghost looked slender, but its strength was surprisingly great. With a pounce, it pushed Qin Chuan to the ground. It opened its mouth full of sharp fangs and was about to bite Qin Chuan's throat. It was truly ferocious. Upon seeing this, Qin Chuan suddenly exerted force with both hands, wanting to push the hill ghost off him. However, when his hands landed on the hill ghost's body, they were soft, and he couldn't exert any strength at all. Just as the hill ghost was about to bite Qin Chuan's neck, a figure suddenly pounced from the side and knocked the hill ghost away from Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan run. Lucy opened her arms and hugged the hill ghost tightly. She wanted to buy time for Qin Chuan to escape. Run, my ass. Get out of the way. Qin Chuan rolled over and got up from the ground. With an angry roar, a bolt of lightning suddenly appeared on his body. A terrifying bolt of lightning condensed in Qin Chuan's palm, transforming into an azure spear. With a forceful throw, it shot towards a hill ghost's head with a whoosh. Sizzle. After the violent bolt of lightning struck the hill ghost's head, it suddenly exploded, transforming into a cage made of lightning. It completely enveloped the hill ghost and Lu Zi, who didn't have time to dodge. Qin Chuan quickly stepped forward and reached out to pull Lu Zi out of the cage. The two of them fell back together. If this move doesn't work, then I really have no other choice. Qin Chuan hugged Lu Zi as he lay on the ground. He looked at the hill ghost howling in the cage and felt helpless. Facing such a powerful and strange creature, he really had no other choice but to risk his life. The offensive methods I have are still too simple. Qin Chuan sighed softly. If he was lucky enough to survive this time, he would definitely work hard to cultivate in the future and master more combat methods. He would never risk his life like he did now. Gradually, the hill ghost's wails became much weaker. It was no longer as crazy and sharp as before. At that moment, the bolt of lightning gradually weakened after its initial outburst. Qin Chuan could already see the hill ghost lying on the ground. Its body was still twitching, and its throat was letting out hoarse roars. Clearly, it was still alive. It can't even die from this. At that moment, the hill ghost's appearance had changed. It was no longer pitch black, but had turned into an incongruous dark blue. Qin Chuan suspected that the hill ghost's body had the strange ability to absorb all kinds of energy. Its appearance had changed probably because its body had absorbed too much bolt of lightning. It seemed that the hill ghost's current situation was not very good. However, Qin Chuan's physical condition was also very poor. At that moment, Lu Zi was still unconscious. If any demon beast sensed the commotion here and heard the sound, it would be terrible. Thinking of this, Qin Chuan struggled to get up from the ground. He reached into his backpack and took out 2 disposable magic weapons, preparing to add more fuel to the hill ghost. At that moment, the hill ghost's body suddenly swelled strangely. In the blink of an eye, it became as round as a balloon. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan was shocked. He subconsciously turned over to protect Lu Zi. Almost at the same time, a violent explosion came from behind him. The terrifying impact sent Qin Chuan and Lu Zi flying. They fell on the lawn more than 10 meters away in a sorry state. This time, Qin Chuan finally could not hold on. His vision turned black, and he fainted. As soon as Qin Chuan woke up, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The intense pain coming from his back almost made him faint again. Qin Chuan, you're awake? Lu Zi, who had been guarding by the side, immediately asked excitedly when she saw Qin Chuan wake up. How do you feel? Qin Chuan slowly opened his eyes and looked at Lu Zi, who was sitting at the side with a worried expression. He grinned and said, looks like I won't die. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi's tense emotions finally relaxed. The next moment, hot tears rolled down from her eyes. You were unconscious for an entire day and night. I was really worried to death. So I was unconscious for so long. Qin Chuan looked up at the bright sky and asked Lu Zi, that hill ghost should be dead, right? Yes. Lu Zi nodded. Then, she opened her hand and placed a green bead the size of an eyeball in front of Qin Chuan. She said, I went to the place where the hill ghost exploded. This is the only thing left. Looking at the green bead in Lu Zi's hand, Qin Chuan could not recognize what it was. He said to Lu Zi, keep it first. Maybe your grandfather will recognize what it is. As he spoke, Qin Chuan frowned again and said to Lu Zi, is the injury on my back very serious? Why does it hurt so much? Hearing Qin Chuan mention the injury on his back, Lu Zi could not help but cry again. She said, "Your combat uniform was destroyed. The flesh on your back was shattered. I can even see your spine." "It's that serious?" Qin Chuan was shocked. It would be fine if they were in the city, but they were in the wilderness. It would be difficult for him to recover from such serious injuries in a short period of time. "I gave you healing medicine and applied external injury medicine. During this period of time, we will find a place to rest. We will continue our journey when your injuries are better." After Lu Zi woke up, she saw Qin Chuan lying on top of her. His back was a bloody mess. Naturally, she guessed that Qin Chuan must have been injured to protect her. She blamed herself and quickly treated Qin Chuan's injuries. Otherwise, Qin Chuan would not have woken up so early. Qin Chuan lay on the ground and said with lingering fear, "This hill ghost is too terrifying. No wonder no one could survive in front of it." The hill ghost's body could absorb energy, which meant that it was not afraid of any attacks. Ordinary people would not be able to do anything to it. If Qin Chuan had not been able to erupt with powerful lightning in an instant and cause the hill ghost to explode, their fate would not have been any better than the others. "Why did you risk your life to save me?" Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with an extremely complicated expression. She was certain that if Qin Chuan had not protected her last night, he would not have suffered such serious injuries. In the end, she was the one who had dragged Qin Chuan down. Qin Chuan chuckled and said, "If you hadn't knocked the hill ghost away in time yesterday, I would have died. But you were also the one who pulled me away yesterday. Otherwise, I would have died earlier than you." What LVZ said was the truth. Back then, she had been stunned by the mountain ghost's strange ability to absorb energy. For a moment, she had forgotten to dodge its attack. If Qin Chuan hadn't pushed her, she would have been a dead person. "Is there any point in talking about this?" Qin Chuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. "We are companions. I saved you, and you saved me. Isn't that normal?" Chapter 117. Companions. It was an answer that Lu Zi expected, but made her feel a little disappointed and regretful. "So, let's find a safe place first." Qin Chuan looked at the messy ground and said to Lu Zi, "I'll teach you how to find a tree hole. Let's go forward and find a tree hole to hide in for a few days." According to Qin Chuan's instructions, Lu Zi quickly found a tree hole about 100 meters away. It could barely accommodate 2 people. After Lu Zi cleaned the tree hole, she came under the tree and carried Qin Chuan up. Qin Chuan sat in the tree hole and looked at the clean and tidy tree hole. He laughed and said, "I didn't expect our Miss Lu to be so good at cleaning." Lu Zi pursed her lips and said to Qin Chuan, "Don't talk nonsense. I'll go find a water source. You rest here. Be careful." Qin Chuan reminded Lu Zi, they must not cause any trouble at this time. If they were not careful, they would be wiped out. LVZ went out for about half an hour before returning to the tree hole with 2 jugs of water. She sat beside Qin Chuan and poured the disinfected water into a cup before bringing it to Qin Chuan. "Let me feed you." Qin Chuan nodded his head and said, "Don't worry." Qin Chuan smiled and enjoyed Lu Zi's thoughtful service. Suddenly, he said, "I suddenly remembered an ancient novel I read. There's a classic line in it. Delang, it's time to take medicine." Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan and asked, "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Qin Chuan coughed and said, "Can you confirm our current position?" "Wait a moment." Lu Zi turned and took out a map from her backpack. After calculating on it with a pen, she pointed at a black spot and said to Qin Chuan, "We are about 400 kilometers away from the blue ancient city marked on the map." 400 kilometers didn't sound like a long distance. If it was outside, it would take less than half an hour to travel 400 kilometers with a shuttle at full speed. However, in the Black Moon Mountain Range, it was normal for it to take half a year to travel 400 kilometers. If they got lost, they might not be able to get out in this life. Qin Chuan looked at the map and frowned slightly, saying, "With my current recovery speed, it will take at least a week to fully recover. It will take some time. Rest for 3 days. Then we will set off. I will carry you." Lu Zi said seriously to Qin Chuan, "Although it will be slower, it is the best choice. That is the only way." Qin Chuan raised his eyes and looked at Lu Zi. I will have to trouble you for the time being. 3 days later, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi, who had been hiding in the tree hole for 3 days, set out again. Along the way, Qin Chuan fully opened his perception and guided Lu Zi to avoid danger after danger. The two gradually left the periphery of the Black Moon mountain range and came to the middle of the mountain range. It was night. Lu Zi and Qin Chuan couldn't find a tree hole to rest in, so they could only sleep in the wild. Because they had entered a dangerous area and could encounter demon beasts at any time, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi were extremely cautious. They didn't dare to light a campfire at night and could only eat some tasteless nutrient fluids. It's the 7th day. Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Lu Zi, who was sitting beside him, "Other than the first and second night, we didn't encounter any more mountain ghosts. In the past few nights, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi were most worried about encountering new mountain ghosts. However, in the past few days, they didn't encounter any more mountain ghosts. It could be said that they were very lucky. Don't jinx it." Lu Zi pursed her lips slightly and said, "During the day, because you said that there were no demon beasts in the middle of the mountain range, a demon wolf suddenly jumped out from the bushes and chased us for an entire afternoon. I used a total of 4 one-time use artifacts to scare it away. Now that you mention mountain ghosts, I'm really a little scared. It's fine. I will protect you well." Qin Chuan smiled and said, "In another day, my injuries will almost Ga. Just as Qin Chuan was speaking, an ear-piercing and unpleasant shriek suddenly rang out from the nearby mountain forest. Hearing this extremely frightening shriek, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi's expressions turned extremely ugly at the same time. Mountain ghost? It was actually another mountain ghost. I told you, you jinx it. Lu Zi felt like she was going crazy. They were being chased by demon beasts during the day, and now they encountered a mountain ghost at night. They were simply too unlucky. Don't worry, that mountain ghost doesn't seem to be coming for us." Qin Chuan reached out and grabbed Lu Zi's hand, indicating that Lu Zi shouldn't be too nervous. He focused his mind and calmed his heart to sense the direction of the mountain ghost shriek. Then he said to Lu Zi, "That mountain ghost should be in the north, about 300 meters away from us." Lu Zi held Qin Chuan's hand tightly and asked with some doubt, "Could it be that the mountain ghost is pestering someone else? Could it be someone who came to participate in the assessment like us?" "That's possible." Qin Chuan squatted and said to Lu Zi, "Let's go over and take a look." "That's too dangerous." Lu Zi almost refused without thinking. They were already very lucky that the mountain ghost didn't come looking for them. If they were to take the initiative to look for the mountain ghost, wouldn't they be tired of living? This mountain ghost is too close to us. What if it deals with the people over there and comes looking for us again? I haven't recovered from my injuries yet, and you've been tired for a day. This is the time when your combat strength is at its weakest. We have to take the initiative to attack and see if we can join forces with the others to deal with this mountain ghost." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi pursed her lips and said to Qin Chuan, "All right, we'll go over. But if we encounter any danger, this time, don't worry about me." "All right." Qin Chuan grinned. "When the time comes, each of us will show our remarkable abilities. Whether or not we can survive will depend on our own abilities." After making their decision, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi immediately took action. Under the cover of the night, they quietly dashed toward the mountain ghost location. Soon, they arrived at the scene. When they hid behind a tree and saw the situation, they couldn't help but reveal extremely shocked expressions. In an open space 10 meters away, a bright bonfire was burning. Next to the bonfire was a mountain ghost lying quietly. Looking at the mountain ghost that no longer showed any signs of life, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi's eyes widened. Less than 2 minutes had passed since they heard the mountain ghost howl. The mountain ghost was actually dead, and its corpse was still intact. "Who did this? Are you looking for me?" At that moment, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded behind Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. Chapter 118. When he heard the voice behind him, Qin Chuan abruptly turned around and took a step forward, shielding Lu Zi behind him. He stared vigilantly at the figure in white who had appeared behind them at some point in time. His expression was extremely solemn. He had clearly unleashed all his senses earlier, but he hadn't sensed anyone behind him. Lu Zi glanced at Qin Chuan, who was shielding her, and a touch of emotion appeared in her eyes. She reached out and gently tugged at Qin Chuan's clothes. She said to Qin Chuan, "I know her. Let me do it." Qin Chuan looked back at Lu Zi with some confusion. Lu Zi actually knew this person? "Baiyu, I'm Lu Zi." Lu Zi took a step forward and forced a smile at the figure in white. "We rushed over because we heard the cries of the mountain ghosts. We have no ill intentions." Qin Chuan couldn't help but be shocked when he heard how Lu Zi addressed the figure in white. So this person was the person that Lu Zi had warned him not to provoke no matter what. Baiyu, who was wearing a long white dress, slowly took 2 steps forward. Her gray eyes looked indifferently at Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. After a long time, she said indifferently, "I know." Looking at Baiyu, who was clearly much shorter than her, Lu Zi felt like she was being looked down upon by Baiyu. She was completely suppressed in terms of aura. She forced a smile at Baiyu and said, "Since you're fine, we won't disturb you. You can go." "He stay." Baiyu didn't ask Lu Zi to stay, but her gaze was locked onto Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan frowned slightly. "I don't think I've seen you before, nor have I provoked you. There are some things I want to ask you." Baiyu was expressionless, as if she didn't want to say anything. "Then let's stay together." Lu Zi gently tugged on Qin Chuan's sleeve, indicating that Qin Chuan should not say anything and follow her instructions. Thus, the 3 of them returned to the bonfire and looked at the mountain ghost that was no longer breathing on the ground. Qin Chuan and Lu Zi still felt that it was a little unreal. How could such a strange and powerful mountain ghost be so easily dealt with? Just how terrifying was this Baiyu's strength? Baiyu sat in front of the bonfire and stared coldly at Qin Chuan. She said, "You're injured. You were injured by a mountain ghost." Qin Chuan was slightly stunned and asked, "How do you know?" "I smell the blood of a mountain ghost on you." Baiyu gave a simple explanation and said, "I want that green bead." Qin Chuan and Lu Zi understood when they heard Baiyu's last sentence. Baiyu didn't really want to ask Qin Chuan anything. She had her eyes on the green bead in Qin Chuan's backpack. "May I ask what this bead is used for?" Although Baiyu's attitude was very displeasing, Qin Chuan didn't want to make a move against Baiyu if it wasn't necessary. Baiyu was silent for a moment in response to Qin Chuan's question, and then she said, "It's useless to you, but it's useful to me. Just treat it as I owe you a favor." Qin Chuan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. He took a deep look at Baiyu, who was unwilling to explain further, and didn't continue to ask. He simply took out the green bead from his backpack and tossed it to Baiyu. "Then I'll give it to you." Baiyu was slightly stunned when she saw Qin Chuan give the bead to her so easily. Then she put it away very carefully and said to Qin Chuan, "Thank you. No need. Okay, you can go." Before Qin Chuan could finish his polite words, Baiyu had already ordered them to leave. Qin Chuan looked at Baiyu's cold expression with some astonishment and was completely stunned. He had seen people who got rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness, but he had never seen someone get rid of it so quickly. It wasn't until they were far away from the bonfire that Qin Chuan came back to his senses and said angrily to Lu Zi, "This Baiyu, she just got the benefits, and she's already chasing us away. She's too heartless. I really want to stay away from her." Lu Zi saw Qin Chuan's unhappy expression and smiled. "There's too much pressure when I'm with her." Qin Chuan nodded in agreement. Lu Zi was right. Qin Chuan felt uncomfortable all over when he was sitting face to face with Baiyu. The pressure was quite great. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Baiyu was definitely the most dangerous person Qin Chuan had ever seen among his peers. This Baiyu was actually able to easily deal with a mountain ghost, and she didn't look like she was injured. I really don't know how she did it. Qin Chuan sighed with emotion. They were both facing a mountain ghost, yet he and Lu Zi had almost lost their lives when they joined forces. However, Baiyu handled it with ease and ease. Comparisons were simply infuriating. The night passed uneventfully. Early the next morning, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi set off on their journey once more. However, Qin Xuan didn't let Lu Zi carry him on her back this time. Instead, he started to travel on his own. The two of them walked forward for around 200 meters before they suddenly saw a demon beast lying on the ground in the grass. This shocked Qin Xuan and Lu Zi because they actually didn't notice the demon beast's existence beforehand. After all, they were less than 10 meters away from the demon beast at this moment. Wait! Qin Xuan glanced at the demonic beast lying in the grass and frowned. This demonic beast is dead. As he spoke, Qin Xuan had already slowly walked over to the demon beast's side. Based on its outward appearance, the demon beast was completely normal, and there were no obvious injuries on its body. However, Qin Xuan saw a thumb-sized bloody hole on the demon beast's head when he pried open the hair on its head. This demon beast probably just died not too long ago. Lu Zi tested the demon beast's temperature, and it was still quite warm. Obviously, it hadn't been dead for too long. How did this demonic beast die? Lu Zi was slightly puzzled. She raised her eyes to glance at Qin Xuan, yet she noticed that Qin Xuan had an extremely strange expression on his face. What's wrong? Qin Xuan took a deep breath and said to Lu Zi, "If I'm not wrong, someone probably used a special method to forcefully remove the demon core on its head, and that's why it died." Lu Zi couldn't help but be shocked when she heard this. Forcefully removing the demon core before the demon beast was killed? Is this really something that a human can do? Do you still remember that mountain ghost from last night? At that time, Bai Yu was nearby, so he didn't carefully examine the mountain ghost's corpse. But now, I seem to know how Bai Yu killed that mountain ghost. Qin Xuan turned around and glanced deeply at Lu Zi. That green pearl is probably equivalent to the demon core of that demon beast. It was extremely likely that the person who killed that demon beast was Bai Yu. Chapter 119. After Qin Xuan's reminder, Lu Zi also thought of the mountain ghost that died in the hands of Bai Yu last night. Its death was almost exactly the same as the demon beast in front of them. It seems that she really did it. She is only at the 5th level of the Qi refining stage. Why is she so strong? Lu Zi was puzzled. Although she was only at the 2nd level of the Qi refining stage, and Qin Xuan was only at the 1st level, the gap was too big. Qin Xuan looked at Lu Zi with some astonishment and said, "She is actually at the 5th level of the Qi refining stage?" "Yes, and she is only at the 5th level of the Qi refining stage at the age of 16. Lu Zi sighed and said, "Compared to her, we don't deserve to be called geniuses at all." Qin Xuan heard this, and the corner of his mouth twitched fiercely. He originally thought that he was very powerful to be able to advance to the Qi refining stage at the age of 18. Now that he saw that she was at the 5th level of the Qi refining stage at the age of 16, he suddenly felt that he was trash. But compared to this, I'm more curious about why she appeared here. Lu Zi was somewhat puzzled. From a place where Bai Yu rested last night to here, they had to walk diagonally. According to common sense, Bai Yu should have walked in a straight line. Qin Xuan pondered for a moment and said, "Last night when I gave her the bead, she said that she owed us a favor. I think this is probably her way of repaying our favor." Lu Zi thought carefully and felt that Qin Xuan's words were quite reasonable. However, whether this was a coincidence or Bai Yu's deliberate action, she still had to wait and see before coming to a conclusion. Qin Xuan and Lu Zi continued to move forward. Along the way, they did not encounter any more danger. Moreover, they found some corpses of demon beasts one after another, and they all died in the same way. After seeing 3 demon beasts in the same way, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi finally determined that these demon beasts were killed by Bai Yu, and the purpose was to repay their favor. This Bai Yu wouldn't be thinking of escorting us all the way to Azure Ancient City, right? When he said these words, the expression on Qin Xuan's face was extremely strange. The feeling of being carefully protected by someone was really quite special. Who knows? But then again, is the 5th level of the refinement stage really that strong? Lu Zi felt that Bai Yu had refreshed her understanding of the strength of the Qi condensation stage. A demonic beast that was at least at the late stage of chi condensation couldn't even last one round against Baiyu. Was the demonic beast too weak, or was Baiyu too strong? To be more accurate, they were too weak. As expected, they did not understand the world of true geniuses. Night fell once again, but Qin Xuan and Lu Zi did not find a place to rest. Instead, they kept moving forward. After advancing for about half an hour, they saw a bonfire in an open space and Baiyu sitting next to it. Seeing Qin Xuan and Lu Zi appear, Baiyu was not surprised, but she did not intend to greet Qin Xuan and Baiyu. Qin Xuan and Lu Zi walked to the bonfire, looked at Baiyu who was sitting there to warm herself, and asked, "You killed the demonic beast during the day, right? Are you helping us?" "I'm returning a favor," Baiyu explained faintly, not willing to say a word more. Qin Xuan and Lu Zi couldn't help but look at each other. Their guess was right. Baiyu wanted to escort them to Azure Ancient City to repay the favor of giving them the beads. "Thank you very much." Qin Xuan sat down next to the bonfire and said to Baiyu, "How long are you going to help us?" "Until I can't help you." It was still a simple answer, which was very in line with Baiyu's style. "How much do you know about the Black Moon Mountain Range?" Qin Xuan asked Baiyu curiously. "Can we move together tomorrow?" "No." Baiyu glanced at Qin Xuan indifferently. "I like to be alone." Qin Xuan shrugged lightly. "Fine." He knew he would be rejected. At this moment, Baiyu seemed to have noticed something. She suddenly stood up and walked towards the forest in front of her. "Don't follow." Hearing Baiyu's words, although Lu Zi was puzzled, she had no intention of following. Qin Xuan stood up and quietly planned to follow and see the situation. "What are you doing?" Lu Zi grabbed Qin Xuan and said, "Be careful not to anger her. It's okay. She won't protect us starting tomorrow. Aren't you curious about how she killed the mountain ghost and monster?" Qin Xuan winked at Lu Zi and said, "I don't believe you're not curious at all." It would be too hypocritical to say that she wasn't curious. Lu Zi hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she said to Qin Xuan, "Let's be careful. Ga. At this moment, the unique screams of the mountain ghost suddenly sounded in the forest where Baiyu was heading. Qin Xuan and Lu Zi immediately rushed in that direction. When they saw the mountain ghost and Baiyu, they happened to see Baiyu killing the mountain ghost. They saw Baiyu standing 10 meters away from the mountain ghost with her palm facing the mountain ghost. A mysterious force rushed left and right in the mountain ghost's body and finally gathered at the mountain ghost's head. With a poof, it broke through the mountain ghost's head and shot out a green bead that accurately landed in Baiyu's palm. The mysterious force that had been rushing left and right in the mountain ghost's body was actually a jet black liquid. "That's the blood of the mountain ghost." Qin Xuan looked at the black liquid that spilled on the ground in surprise and bewilderment. Baiyu can actually control the blood in the mountain ghost body. Controlling the blood in the mountain ghost and monster's body and forcefully ejecting their monster cores. This is the mysterious method Baiyu used to kill the mountain ghost and monster, right? Lu Zi couldn't help but gasp. If Baiyu used this method on humans, then didn't that mean, at this moment, Baiyu didn't leave immediately after killing the mountain ghost? Her indifferent eyes actually revealed a faint trace of sorrow, as if she was sad about the mountain ghost's death. "I'm sorry." Baiyu looked at the mountain ghost's corpse on the ground with a complicated expression and muttered softly. Then she slowly turned her gaze to Qin Xuan and Lu Zi, who were hiding behind a tree. Qin Xuan and Lu Zi walked out when they noticed Baiyu's gaze on them. Qin Xuan pursed his lips slightly and said to Baiyu, "We heard the mountain ghost cry and were a little worried about you, so we rushed over." Baiyu didn't say anything. She just took a deep look at Qin Xuan, and then she turned around and walked back the way she came. "Help me bury him." Qin Xuan glanced at the mountain ghost's corpse on the ground and nodded. Then he walked over to the mountain ghost. He glanced at the black liquid on the ground and squatted down to examine the mountain ghost's corpse. He finally confirmed that the black liquid was the mountain ghost's blood. In other words, Baiyu really could control the blood of other living beings. Chapter 120. Lu Zi stood beside Qin Chuan and looked at the corpse of the mountain ghost. She said to Qin Chuan in a subtle tone, "This is the first time I've heard of such a strange ability." Blood was incomparably important to all living creatures. Bai Yu could control blood, which was equivalent to controlling the life and death of others. Who wouldn't be afraid of such a terrifying ability? No wonder she didn't want us to follow her. Maybe she was worried that she would scare us. Qin Chuan sighed. While digging a hole, he said curiously, "But I keep feeling that Bai Yu doesn't seem to be willing to kill these mountain ghosts. Her attitude towards them is a bit special." I have the same feeling. Lu Zi also felt that Bai Yu's attitude towards the mountain ghosts was very special. She had never heard of anyone burying the mountain ghosts after killing them. At least, Bai Yu didn't think of burying the dead monsters during the day. "Let's follow her first." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Lu Zi, "Now that we know her secret, it's best to become friends with her. Otherwise, she might silence us." "How petty." Lu Zi curled her lips and helped Qin Chuan carry the corpse of the mountain ghost into the hole and bury it. After doing all this, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi returned to the camp and looked at Bai Yu, who was sitting in front of the bonfire in a daze. The two acted relatively naturally. They didn't deliberately alienate Bai Yu, nor did they deliberately get close to her. They still maintained their previous attitude, neither too far nor too close. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, when Qin Chuan and Lu Zi woke up, Bai Yu was no longer in the camp. They didn't know when Bai Yu left, but on the way forward, they saw the corpses of monsters as usual. Ever since they had Bai Yu's protection, Qin Chuan and LVZ's path to the test had become smooth sailing. They didn't have to worry about the attacks of demon beasts during the day, and they didn't have to worry about the attacks of mountain ghosts at night. Their lives were simply extremely comfortable. However, under these circumstances, not only did Qin Chuan not relax, he cultivated even more diligently instead. To be honest, although this feeling of being protected was very good, Qin Chuan didn't like such a comfortable feeling. Compared to being protected by others, he hoped that he could become stronger and rely on his own strength to protect himself and even the people around him. In this way, the strange trio of Qin Chuan, Lu Zi, and Bai Yu moved forward. After 5 days, they finally walked out of the middle of the Black Moon Mountain Range and approached the true center of the mountain range. Bai Yu sat in front of the bonfire and looked calmly at Qin Chuan. "If we go any further, I won't be able to protect you." Qin Chuan smiled when he heard Bai Yu's words. "Actually, you've already helped us a lot. You've already paid back all the favors you owe us. I think that perhaps we can walk together and fight side by side for the rest of the journey." After experiencing the dangers of the Black Moon Mountain Range, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi realized that without Bai Yu's help, it would take them at least half a month to reach here with their strength. It could be said that Bai Yu had helped them greatly. Bai Yu remained silent in response to Qin Chuan's suggestion, but she didn't explicitly refuse. This allowed Qin Chuan to see hope in fighting side by side with Bai Yu. "I think we come out." Qin Chuan suddenly shouted and turned to look at the dark forest to his left. At almost the same time, Bai Yu also turned to look in the direction that Qin Chuan was looking, her gray eyes bursting with a shocking, killing intent. I'll come out. Don't misunderstand. We're all on the same side." From the darkness, a tall and thin figure slowly walked out with his hands raised high. He smiled as he looked at Qin Chuan and the other two in the camp and said, "If I'm not wrong, you guys should be here to participate in the Black Moon Combat Academy's official assessment, right?" "What a coincidence. So am I. I was resting over there when I saw the fire. I wanted to come over and take a look, but I didn't think that it would cause a misunderstanding." The youth lightly coughed and said, Let me introduce myself. I'm Chen Changxing, 17 years old this year. I'm currently at the 3rd level of Qi refining." Looking at Chen Changxing, who was standing not too far away, Qin Chuan's expression couldn't help but become somewhat strange. This was another genius who was younger than him, but stronger than him. I accidentally heard you guys say that you wanted to team up. If you don't mind, how about I join in as well?" Chen Changxing said as he walked towards the bonfire. When he was less than 5 meters away from the bonfire, Baiyu slowly raised her right hand towards Chen Chongqing. Seeing Baiyu's action, Chen Chongqing immediately jumped back in fright. Don't do anything. I really want to team up with you guys. Chen Chongqing was somewhat helpless. He just wanted to find a partner. So why was it so difficult? I don't welcome you. Baiyu indifferently looked at Chen Chongqing. She was always very vigilant towards unfamiliar people. Of course, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi weren't very familiar with each other. They were only working together because of their friendship. I'm right here. I'm not going over. Chen Chongqing spread his hands and then turned his gaze to Qin Xuan. Brother, how about you help me persuade her? Qin Xuan chuckled. Do you think I have a lot of face? Qin Xuan wouldn't do such a stupid thing. It would be strange if Baiyu listened to him. Suddenly, Qin Xuan seemed to have thought of something. So he asked Chen Chongqing, did you encounter a mountain ghost? Mountain ghost? Chen Chongqing said casually, of course I did. I even killed two. Qin Xuan's interest was immediately piqued when he heard this. He asked, then did you find a green bead from the mountain ghost corpse? Lu Zi and Baiyu looked at Qin Xuan at almost the same time when they heard Qin Xuan's question. They somewhat understood what Qin Xuan meant. Are you talking about this? Chen Chongqing took out an exquisite mechanical box from his backpack and opened it. He presented the two green beads inside to Qin Xuan and the others. I've studied this thing all the way, but I couldn't find any use for it at all. Why? Do you know it? Qin Xuan chuckled. Give me these two beads, and I'll help you persuade her to take you with her. Chen Chongqing hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still chose to hand over the beads. He had no choice. He had tried, and the road ahead was very dangerous. He couldn't pass it alone. Now that there was someone he could work with, it wasn't impossible to sacrifice a little in exchange for an opportunity to work together. After making the decision, Chen Chongqing threw the two green beads and the mechanical box to Qin Xuan. Qin Xuan reached out and caught the mechanical box, then handed it to Baiyu sitting opposite him. Here. Baiyu looked at the mechanical box that Qin Xuan handed over and hesitated for a moment before finally accepting it. She whispered to Qin Xuan, thank you. Hey, I say. Chen Chongqing looked at Qin Xuan and Baiyu with a black face. Shouldn't I be the one being thanked? Chapter 121. Sitting next to the bonfire, Chen Chongqing looked at Qin Xuan's smiling face with displeasure. He really wanted to punch Qin Xuan's face. If he had known that he only needed to give Baiyu 2 pearls to join this small group, he wouldn't have bothered to find Qin Xuan to be the middleman. Profiteer, he actually took Baiyu's gratitude as the difference in price. What made Chen Chongqing want to vomit blood and be speechless was that Qin Xuan was only at the first level of qi refining stage, the weakest among the 4 of them. Hey, aren't you afraid that I'll take revenge on you for doing this? Chen Chongqing decided to get back some face. He had to let Qin Xuan realize who was the boss of this group. You can try. LVZ looked at Chen Chongqing coldly. She then took out 2 single-use magic tools from her bag and held them in her hands. Seeing Lu Zi's action, Chen Chongqing's face suddenly changed. He quickly waved his hand and said, don't misunderstand. I'm just joking. Don't take it seriously. If he was hit by a disposable magic tool at such a close distance, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. It was not worth it to lose half his life just to get back some face. Okay, I think we should talk about the later part of the assessment. Qin Xuan smiled lightly. He stretched out his hand and patted LVZ's shoulder lightly, indicating for her to put away the disposable magic tool. After that, he looked at Chen Chongqing and said, I think that since you took the initiative to appear and join forces with us, then you must have attempted to continue forward by yourself. Do you have any discoveries that you can share with us? I did have some discoveries. Chen Chongqing coughed and said indifferently, from here, about 1 kilometer or so, we will enter the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range. And from there, the Black Moon Mountain Range will start to become strange. Chen Chongqing paused for a moment and looked at the people sitting quietly around him. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he asked, shouldn't you be curious and ask me what's so strange about the center now? Chen Chongqing's voice fell. The surroundings were still quiet, An awkward silence. All right, I surrender. Chen Changxing complained helplessly. You people have no curiosity at all. This makes me feel very unaccomplished. After complaining, Chen Changxing continued. At the junction between the center and middle of the Black Moon Mountain Range, everything in the Black Moon Mountain Range has turned pitch black. Be it the soil, the grass, or the trees, everything has turned black. All black. Qingchuan was a little surprised. Why was there such a strange change? I don't know the exact reason. At that time, I only walked in for about 100 meters before retreating. Chen Changxing spread out his hands and said, I don't know anything else. Why did you withdraw? Did you encounter some kind of danger? Qingchuan was very cooperative and played the supporting role. Because I saw a mountain ghost. Chen Changxing took a deep look at Qingchuan and said, I can deal with a single mountain ghost, and I can barely deal with two. But what if there are dozens of them? As soon as Chen Changxing finished speaking, Qingchuan and LVZ's expressions couldn't help but become slightly surprised. On the other hand, Baiyu remained expressionless as if she wasn't interested in all of this. Or perhaps it could be said that she was already aware of this. When I discovered those mountain ghosts, they also discovered me at the same time. They chased after me, but when they reached the junction between the center and middle of the mountain range, they stopped, as if they were unwilling to leave the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range. I looked at those pitch-black mountain ghosts and the surrounding pitch-black environment, and I couldn't help but have a bold guess. Chen Changxing did not voice out his bold conjecture, but everyone present was already well aware of it. The center of the Black Moon Mountain Range was pitch black. Perhaps it had something to do with the mountain ghosts. However, they didn't know which of the two was influencing who. If there are so many mountain ghosts in the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range, then even if the four of us work together, we might not be able to break through. Luzi frowned and said, the Black Moon Combat Academy's official assessment shouldn't be so crazy, right? Who knows? Chen Changxing shrugged and said, anyway, if I had to break through by myself, I would definitely not go. Qingchuan muttered to himself for a moment, then looked at Baiyu and asked, do you have anything to say? Baiyu raised her eyes and looked at Qingchuan. She was silent for a moment, then pursed her lips and said, no. Qingchuan was speechless as he rolled his eyes. He then turned to Chen Changxing and said, you can leave. Our alliance is now dissolved. Chen Changxing was speechless. The Black Moon Combat Academy's official assessment doesn't really require us to pass through the Black Moon Mountain Range. Suddenly, Baiyu opened her mouth again. This time, she spoke more than ever before. She looked seriously at Qingchuan and said, as long as you can kill a mountain ghost and obtain a green pearl, you can hand it over to the academy after the assessment ends in 2 months. Then, you will naturally pass the assessment and become an official student. Everyone was stunned when they heard Baiyu's words. No one had thought that she would reveal such shocking information at this time. How do you know? Qingchuan was curious. They were all examinees, so how did Baiyu know such insider information? I only said this much. Clearly, explaining so much to everyone was already Baiyu's limit. She didn't want to continue on this topic. Although there are very few mountain ghosts in the middle layer, it doesn't mean that there aren't any. We still have more than a month. If we wait for them, we can definitely obtain the green pearl again. Chen Changxing pondered for a moment before patting Qingchuan's shoulder. You're right. Our alliance can be dissolved. If the two of you want to follow me, then you must protect yourselves. Baiyu suddenly spoke again to Qingchuan and Luzi. It will be difficult for me to protect you in the center. Chen Changxing's eyes lit up when he heard this. You still plan on going deeper? Then bring me along. Qingchuan glanced at Chen Changxing and said, our alliance has already been dissolved. You said it yourself. Chen Changxing was speechless. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of Lu Zi's single-use magic tool, he would definitely let Qingchuan know who was the strongest in this group. Baiyu didn't explicitly say that she wanted to bring Chen Changxing along, but Chen Changxing shamelessly refused to leave. He didn't believe that Baiyu could forcefully chase him away for the sake of those 2 pearls. As for Qingchuan and Lu Zi's opinions, everyone was hanging on by Yu's thigh, so no one should say anything. Chapter 122. Early the next morning, the new four-person team set off together and headed towards the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range. Just as Chun Chongqing said, after about a kilometer, they saw the intersection between the middle and the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range. Just like the separation of shadow and sunlight, the pitch-black ground and plants in the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range formed a sharp contrast with the brown soil and green vegetation in the middle. So strange. LVZ's eyes were filled with shock as she looked at the distinctly colored boundary. She couldn't help but feel a sense of unease in her heart. That strange darkness was like a gaping maw that wanted to devour all the colors in the world, turning it pitch black. Be careful. Qin Chuan pursed his lips and reached out to gently hold Lu Zi's hand. In this kind of place with unknown dangers, it was better to be careful. Lu Zi looked down at Qin Chuan's hand and blushed slightly. She quietly held Qin Chuan's hand tightly. Seeing this scene, Chun Chongqing was speechless and ridiculed. When single dogs are stuffed with dog food, no couple in the world is innocent. He was also very scared and wanted to find someone to hold hands with. But if it was Baiyu, then forget it. Let's go. Baiyu took the lead and walked into the darkness without any hesitation. Her figure was gradually swallowed by the darkness. Qin Chuan pulled Lu Zi and followed. Chun Chongqing followed closely behind, in charge of bringing up the rear. In the darkness, Qin Chuan fully activated his perception. He curiously and cautiously sensed everything around him. He discovered that the surrounding trees and grass were all alive. Apart from the color, there was no difference from the outside. Do you guys think the mountain ghosts will lose color? Chun Chongqing suddenly asked out of curiosity. Qin Chuan was speechless. At a time like this, please don't make such a silly joke, okay? At this moment, Baiyu, who was walking at the front, stopped moving forward. Qin Chuan and the other two immediately stepped forward and stood with Baiyu. They looked ahead vigilantly. 10 meters in front of them, there were dozens of pairs of scarlet eyes staring at them. Mountain ghosts. Hordes of mountain ghosts. I saw the same situation yesterday. Chun Chongqing whispered. What should we do now? Qin Chuan ignored Chun Chongqing and looked at Baiyu, waiting for her to make a decision. After a period of silent confrontation, the mountain ghosts in front of them slowly retreated, as if they had no intention of fighting with them. This surprised Chun Chuan. However, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi could vaguely guess that the retreat of the mountain ghosts had something to do with Baiyu. After the mountain ghosts retreated, Baiyu continued forward, and Qin Chuan and the others followed behind her. It wasn't long before they encountered another group of mountain ghosts, and the scene from before played out once more. After encountering the third situation where the mountain ghosts in their way retreated, even the slow-witted Chun Chongqing understood that the retreat of these mountain ghosts had something to do with Baiyu. He had really found the right person this time. Compared to Chun Chongqing's relaxed and excited mood, Qin Chuan's mood was much more solemn. This was because he noticed that as the number of mountain ghosts they encountered increased, the confrontation between Baiyu and these mountain ghosts gradually became longer. Perhaps after a few more times, Baiyu would no longer be able to make the mountain ghosts retreat. At that time, if they wanted to continue forward, they would have to get rid of the mountain ghosts blocking their way. This situation came earlier than Qin Chuan had expected. When they encountered the fifth wave of mountain ghosts blocking their way, Baiyu and these mountain ghosts confronted each other for a full 10 minutes. However, these mountain ghosts had no intention of retreating at all. Their scarlet eyes were filled with ferocious killing intent. Gaga gaga. Following a series of ear-piercing screeches, the dozens of mountain ghosts in front of them charged towards Qin Chuan's group of four. A terrifying aura instantly enveloped the four of them, pressing down on them like numerous mountains. Retreat. Chun Chongqing saw that the situation was bad and immediately wanted to retreat. However, Baiyu took a step forward and blocked the first mountain ghost attack. She said coldly, "You can't retreat. We'll be surrounded." Everyone's expressions changed when they heard Baiyu's words. They couldn't retreat, which meant that they had to move forward. If they couldn't get rid of this wave of mountain ghosts, they would definitely die. Seeing that there was no way out, Chen Chongqing gritted his teeth and took off his backpack. He took out some accessories and quickly assembled them into a silver-gray spear. "Die for me!" Chen Chongqing roared angrily. The spear in his hand was like a dragon as it stabbed out at lightning speed. The tyrannical impact directly pierced through the mountain ghost's body, causing it to wail in pain. At the same time, Lu Zi and Qin Xuan stood back to back as they dealt with the siege of 3 mountain ghosts. Qin Xuan relied on his powerful perception to dodge the mountain ghost's fatal attacks, but he didn't have a good way to deal damage to them. In a place like this, it was best not to use his explosive ultimate move if he could, because once he used it, he would definitely become a burden to the team and drag the others down. Lu Zi was already going all out. She took out 3 single-use magic weapons in one go and held a fine longsword magic weapon in her hand. She forced a mountain ghost to retreat. Although she didn't succeed in defeating the mountain ghost, she completely suppressed it in terms of momentum. Bai Yu, who had the strongest combat strength, had already dealt with a mountain ghost. However, she was currently surrounded by 5 mountain ghosts. Even though Bai Yu was attacking with all her might, she still couldn't get rid of these mountain ghosts in a short time. And the longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for everyone. There's no other way. Qin Xuan gritted his teeth and said to Lu Zi beside him, "Do your best to buy me time. I only need 10 seconds." Hearing Qin Xuan's words, Lu Zi didn't respond. She directly took out the remaining 3 single-use magic weapons in her backpack and activated them without hesitation. At this time, Qin Xuan closed his eyes slightly and began to inscribe a talisman array with his mental strength. Qin Xuan's abnormal behavior attracted Chen Chongqing's attention. When he saw the runes slowly appear around Qin Xuan, he couldn't help but widen his eyes and blurt out, F***CK, F***CK, using mental strength to create an array in the void. 10 seconds didn't sound long, but in this dangerous situation, 10 seconds was as long as a century. It was incomparably unbearable. Just as Lu Zi activated all the single-use magic weapons and was about to collapse, Qin Xuan finally finished inscribing the last stroke of the talisman array. Lightning Manipulation Talisman Array, complete. Chapter 123. The moment the Lightning Manipulation Talisman Array was successfully inscribed, Qin Xuan held the mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone that he had obtained from Guo Hao tightly in his right hand and drew out the majestic power of thunder contained within it. It transformed into a lightning snake that leaped and flickered wildly among the mountain ghosts. Sizzle! The lightning snake roared and bound many mountain ghosts in the blink of an eye. The violent power of thunder wreaked havoc and crazily poured into the bodies of these mountain ghosts, turning the pitch-black mountain ghosts into a dark blue color. "Get out of the way!" Qin Xuan roared angrily, and everyone immediately fled in all directions. At the same time, the bodies of the dozens of mountain ghosts that were connected together suddenly swelled up and then exploded with a rumble. The pitch-black blood was like sulfuric acid, corroding everything that came into contact with it. Huff! Huff! Qin Xuan panted violently and looked at the messy ground around him. His eyes were full of fear. If he hadn't drawn out the last bit of power of thunder from the Thunder Spirit Stone at the last critical moment and turned it into a barrier in front of him, the explosion just now would have killed him. Bai Yu, Lu Zi, and Chen Chongqing returned after the explosion and looked at the messy ground around them. Their expressions were extremely horrified. Even Bai Yu, who was always expressionless, was no exception. "Oh my God, this is too terrifying." Chen Chongqing glanced at the large pit with a diameter of about 3 meters in front of him and the half-rotten tree trunk that had been corroded. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Fortunately, we dodged in time. Otherwise, even if we didn't die, we would be half dead." "Qin Xuan, are you okay?" Lu Zi looked at Qin Xuan worriedly. Her hands kept searching Qin Xuan's body to check his physical condition. After discovering that there were no obvious injuries on Qin Xuan's body, her nervous heart relaxed a little. "I'm not injured. I'm just a little exhausted." Qin Chuan shook his head gently, then smiled at Lu Zi, indicating that he was fine. He was indeed not injured, but he had consumed too much of his spiritual energy while inscribing the glyph array, so he was a bit tired. This Thunder Control Rune Matrix was the second rune matrix that Qin Chuan had learned from the thunder-devouring scripture. It was also the first time that Qin Chuan used it in a real battle. Its power and consumption were beyond Qin Chuan's expectation. At this time, Baiyu had already collected all the green beads scattered on the ground. There were 14 of them in total. She kept one of them and handed the rest to Qin Chuan. "This is yours." Qin Chuan looked at the green beads that Baiyu handed over. He reached out and took 3 of them, saying, "These things are useless to us. We only need 1 each to guarantee that we can pass the test. You can take the rest." With that said, Qin Chuan handed the 3 beads to Lu Zi and Chun Changxing respectively, keeping the last one for himself. Looking at the remaining beads in her hand, Baiyu was silent for a moment, and then said softly, "Thank you, brother. You're really generous. You're absolutely the most talented and powerful glyph array master I've ever seen." Chun Changxing took the beads and looked at Qin Chuan with excitement in his eyes, saying, "I really didn't expect that you could actually create a glyph array. You have to know that even some high-level glyph array masters may not be able to do this. Using spiritual energy as a glyph brush to create a glyph array in the air. Those who could do this were all top geniuses in the glyph array Dao. Qin Chuan could do well in the circle of glyph array masters with just this skill and become an existence that everyone respected. At first, Chun Changxing saw that Qin Chuan was only at the first level of the Qi refinement realm, so he somewhat underestimated Qin Chuan. Now that he saw that Qin Chuan's talent in the glyph array Dao was so shocking, he really wanted to immediately take a photo with Qin Chuan and show off when Qin Chuan became famous in the future. "Let's go first." Qin Chuan glanced at Baiyu and asked, "How much longer will it take for us to get out of here?" Baiyu turned her gaze to the front and said softly, "We'll be able to see the Azure Ancient City after another 10 kilometers. Qin Chuan's expression changed slightly when he heard this, and he said, "Then how many more mountain ghosts are obstructing us?" "A lot." Baiyu looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and asked, "How many more times can you use that method?" Qin Chuan laughed bitterly and shook his head. "I used up the strength of an entire mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone in that attack, just now, and that's the only one I have." In other words, Qin Chuan was no longer able to use the lightning manipulation glyph array from before. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone's expression couldn't help but become a little solemn. Without Qin Chuan's lightning manipulation glyph array, it was undoubtedly more difficult than ascending to the heavens for them to break through the blockade of these mountain ghosts. "We have no way out. If we go back now, those mountain ghosts that let us in before won't let us leave again." Baiyu looked at the road ahead with a slightly complicated expression and said in a low voice, "We can only go forward now." "Then let's go." Chun Changxing sighed. He didn't want to blame Qin Chuan for not bringing a few more mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stones. Firstly, no one knew that they would encounter such a situation. Secondly, Qin Chuan had just saved them. If he thought like that, what was the difference between him and an ungrateful villain? "I want to know if we can avoid those mountain ghosts." Lu Zi glanced at Baiyu with some doubt. Although there were many mountain ghosts, it was impossible for them to block all the paths, right? "We can't sense the mountain ghosts from a distance, but they can easily find us. So no matter which path we take, we can't avoid the mountain ghosts," Baiyu explained indifferently. "We can only leave if we kill our way through." Killing their way through sounded simple, but it was too difficult to do. With their current state and strength, it was really difficult to deal with a dozen mountain ghosts at the same time. At this moment, Qin Chuan leaned his body on Lu Zi. Firstly, he was really tired and needed a rest. Secondly, he needed to concentrate on communicating with the big brother in his mind. "Brother, ever since I gave you that stone, you stopped talking to me. Now that I'm in danger, you should at least do something, right?" Looking at the indifferent runic sword floating above the talent rune, Qin Chuan really wanted to cry. He had been calling all the way, but he didn't get any response. "Brother, you're going too far." Qin still didn't give up. He tried to say to the runic sword, "As long as you help me get through this crisis, I swear I'll find a few more stones like that for you to absorb." This time, the runic sword finally stopped being silent. Instead, it gently trembled and responded to Qin. Seeing that the runic sword finally reacted, Qin's face couldn't help but darken. He gritted his teeth and said, "You dog, I knew you could hear me. You ignored me before because there was no benefit, right? You're really treacherous." Chapter 124. Buzz. A dazzling golden rune suddenly appeared on the runic sword and slowly landed on Qin's innate talent rune. At this moment, Qin felt as if a special memory had appeared in his mind. Qin slightly closed his eyes and carefully comprehended this memory. An excited smile involuntarily appeared on his face. "Qin, what's wrong?" Luzi had been paying attention to Qin the entire time. When she saw the smile on Qin's face, her expression couldn't help but become somewhat strange. This smile was so wretched. "Cough, cough, I'm fine." Qin lightly coughed and said, "I'm just thinking about how I'm about to complete the assessment and become an official student of the Black Moon Combat Academy. So I'm a little excited." Hearing Qin's words, Chen Chongxing, who was walking in front, curled his lips and said, "Let's talk after we get out of here alive." As the group continued forward, they originally thought that they would quickly encounter another wave of mountain ghosts blocking their path. However, what surprised them was that they didn't encounter any new mountain ghosts along the way. This should have been something worth celebrating, but when they saw Bayu's serious expression, the group couldn't feel happy at all. Clearly, Bayu knew why there weren't any new mountain ghosts blocking their path, and this change would definitely lead to another unforeseen event. An evil and powerful aura that made one feel despair descended without any warning. It was like the shadow of the night, completely enveloping the group. "What is this thing?" Chen Chongxing's eyes were filled with shock as he looked ahead. He couldn't see anything, but he could clearly sense that not far ahead, there was a terrifying power slowly approaching them. Qin and Lu Zi also sensed this mysterious and powerful power. It was a terrifying existence that they absolutely couldn't contend against. "It's a mountain ghost." Bayu's eyes were solemn as she looked ahead and said in a low voice, "It's walking towards us. It's so powerful. Could it be the king of the mountain ghosts?" Chen Chongxing looked at Bayu in horror and said, "This thing, I'm afraid that even a foundation establishment expert would die here." Dong, dong, dong. The earth trembled and roared like an earthquake. As the sense of danger grew stronger, a huge bloated body gradually appeared in front of Qin and the other three. Its body was covered with hundreds of scarlet red eyes, and countless mouths filled with sharp fangs were constantly opening and closing. Grayish-black saliva flowed wantonly, emitting a fishy stench that caused one to feel nauseous. Looking at the monster that seemed to have been stitched together by countless mountain ghosts, Chen Chongxing couldn't help but widen his eyes as if he had seen a ghost. "This is the mountain ghost you were talking about? Is this a ghost mountain?" Bayu looked gravely at the stitched monster that was walking over step by step and said to everyone, "This is a monster formed by the mountain ghost power. Everyone, be careful." Before Bayu's voice fell, the pair of eyes on the stitched monster's thick left arm suddenly blinked and shot out two blood-red rays of light straight at Bayu. It happened so suddenly that by the time Bayu reacted, the two blood-red rays were already in front of her. She could only try her best to dodge. With a poochie sound, Bayu's skirt was pierced by the two blood-red rays of light. Then, the two blood-red rays of light didn't slow down and shot deep into the ground, leaving two deep, smoking holes in the ground. Seeing this scene, everyone's expressions couldn't help but become serious. If they were hit, they would probably be directly pierced through. And this was only the activation of a pair of eyes. What if all the eyes in the stitched monster's body were activated? Thinking of this, everyone shuddered in fear. Dong, dong. After the stitch monster took 2 more steps forward, it stopped. The eyeballs on its body moved flexibly, and its ferocious gaze kept moving between Qin Chuan and the other 3 before finally focusing on Bai Yu. Almost at the same time, the hundreds of eyeballs were covered in a hazy red color. They gradually gathered together and turned into a bloody ray that was as thick as a bucket. Like the laser cannons of a battleship, it was shot out brutally. Qin Chuan and the other 3 tried their best to escape. Boom! Accompanied by a violent roar, the blood-red ray suddenly expanded and exploded, turning everything within a radius of tens of meters into ashes. The aftermath of the explosion spread in all directions like a hurricane, tearing everything within 100 meters apart. When the aftermath of the explosion gradually dissipated, within 100 meters of the explosion, only the huge stitch monster was still standing. Other than that, it was a mess. Qin Chuan lay on the ground and looked at the surroundings that were swept away by the aftermath of the explosion. His face was pale. Just the aftermath of the explosion was enough to make him vomit blood. If he was directly in the center of the explosion, wouldn't he be torn to pieces on the spot? Looking at the stitched monster, standing not far away and glaring at him, Qin Chuan didn't dare to make any movements for fear of attracting the attention of the stitched monster. He was lucky enough to escape death just now, but he might not be able to escape again. Walala. At this moment, a petite figure suddenly crawled out from the dark soil. She slowly steadied herself and looked at the stitched monster in front of her with sorrowful eyes. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Gaga gaga. The stitched monster was extremely excited when it saw that someone was still alive. All the eyeballs on its body moved at this time and aimed at Bai Yu. Whoosh! A piercing sound rang out as a long spear pierced straight into one of the eyeballs of the stitched monster. The mouth on the stitched monster immediately issued an angry and miserable shriek as it turned its gaze from Bai Yu to Chen Chongqing, who had attacked it. F***CK. Looking at this scene, Chen Chongqing immediately cursed, turned around, and ran. Qin Chuan, where are you? Lu Zi also crawled out from the soil at this time. She didn't care about her injuries or the danger in front of her. She only wanted to confirm Qin Chuan's safety as soon as possible. I'm here. Qin Chuan had no choice but to stand up. He glanced at Lu Zi, who was riddled with wounds, and quickly walked over to pick up Lu Zi and ran with all his might into the distance. Qin Chuan, are we going to die? Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated gaze. Her expression was a little gloomy as she said, "But I haven't fulfilled my dream yet." "Don't worry, you won't die." Qin Chuan placed Lu Zi next to a big tree and said solemnly to Lu Zi, "Wait here for me to pick you up. No matter what happens later, don't go over." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi grabbed Qin Chuan's arm and asked, "What are you going to do?" Qin Chuan grinned and said helplessly, "I'm going to be a hero." Chapter 125. When Qin Chuan returned to the battlefield again, the stitch monster was roaring and constantly attacking Chen Chongqing with bloody rays. Chen Chongqing was already trying his best to dodge, but there were too many bloody rays. His right leg was pierced by a bloody ray, and he immediately fell to the ground with a plop. F***CK, your grandmother. Chen Chongqing held his right leg and howled, cursing at the stitched monster. On the other side, Bai Yu, who was also focused on by the stitched monster, was also in a very bad situation. Her arms and calves were pierced by bloody rays, but she still gritted her teeth and persevered, not falling immediately. However, anyone could see that Bai Yu was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Seeing Bai Yu in danger and Chen Chongqing rolling and crawling on the ground to avoid the bloody rays, Qin Chuan no longer hesitated. He roared and suddenly rushed toward the stitched monster. Chen Chongqing heard Qin Chuan's roar and saw Qin Chuan rushing toward the stitched monster. He could not help but roll his eyes. He's rushing to his death. Another blood-red beam pierced through Chen Chongqing's calf. The intense burning sensation caused Chen Chongqing to howl in pain once more. At this time, the eyeballs on the stitched monster were focused on dealing with Bai Yu and Chen Chongqing. They did not pay too much attention to Qin Chuan, who was rushing over. After Qin Chuan approached, those sharp mouths suddenly stretched out slender tongues and lashed at Qin Chuan like whips. Qin Chuan fully activated his perception and tried his best to avoid the lashes of these tongues. Even so, his body was hit twice in a row, and his skin and flesh were torn open. The flesh wounds were secondary. The key was that the grayish-black saliva on the tongues had a strong corrosive effect. The piercing pain almost made Qin Chuan faint on the spot. However, Qin Chuan's efforts were not without any reward. He endured the pain on his body, endured the lashes of the tongues and the corrosion of the saliva, and finally approached the ugly and bloated body of the stitched monster. Bastard crawl! Qin Chuan opened his mouth and let out a crazy roar. He suddenly raised his right hand and ruthlessly slapped the stitched monster's body. At the same time, a bright golden light suddenly burst out from Qin Chuan's palm, like a scorching sun in the sky. Wherever the golden light touched, everything melted like snow. The huge and bloated body of the stitched monster was unable to resist the golden light and was completely melted in the blink of an eye. It did not even have the chance to scream, as if it had never appeared. In the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range, Azure Ancient City, Ningya stood at the top of the bell tower and looked at the dark forest in the distance with a serious expression. She seemed to have something on her mind. La la la, if you're worried, you can go and take a look. A cute voice sounded in Ningya's ear. Then, Suyua's petite figure appeared beside Ningya and said, "They've been in the cursed land for 10 days. If you don't do anything, they might really die in there." Ningya frowned slightly and said, "Why didn't you stop them from entering back then? The rules of the assessment state that we can't interfere before the candidates ask for help." Suyuluo spread out her hands and said, "We didn't expect them to enter the cursed land instead of retreating quickly like the other candidates in the past. By the time our invigilator realized that something was amiss and went in to look for them, they were already gone. It was also because of this that the assessment ended early to prevent any super geniuses from accidentally entering and losing their lives." "I know all this." Ningya's expression was gloomy. "The cursed land is too mysterious. Even if I went in, it would be very difficult to find them." If it was just 1 or 2 days, she was still confident of finding Qin Chuan and the rest. But 10 days had already passed. No Qi refinement cultivator had ever survived for more than 10 days in the cursed land. Even 3 days was difficult. "If it were up to me, we should move the school to the spirit city outside." Suyuluo smiled and said, "This way, we can leave the cursed land far away." "You really talk a lot of nonsense." Ningya glanced coldly at Suyuluo. "Now that Qin Chuan is out of the picture, why don't you choose one of the remaining 5 super geniuses to be your student?" Suyuluo suggested to Ningya. "Today, the auditing students and the 5 super geniuses will enter the school through the teleportation array. If you're late, you might not be able to choose a suitable student. I'd rather go without than have something substandard." Ningya snorted. If there were no suitable candidates, she would rather not take in any students. Dong, dong, dong. The distant and solemn sound of the bell rang throughout the entire Azure Ancient City. The calm and peaceful Azure Ancient City seemed to come alive at this moment. "The bell has rung. The new students are here." Suyuluo looked at Ningya with a smile and said, "I plan to choose a few students who are pleasing to the eye. Are you really not coming with me?" Ningya took a deep look at the cursed land in the distance and pursed her lips slightly before saying softly, "Qin Chuan." Hundreds of figures stood on a flat and huge bluestone plaza. They curiously sized up their surroundings and felt that everything around them was new. In front of these hundreds of figures, there were 5 arrogant-looking youths scattered in all directions. They arrogantly looked at the people around them and faintly had a sense of superiority over everyone else. These 5 mavericks were the 5 super geniuses who had passed the official assessment and obtained the qualifications to become the first-year students of the Black Moon Combat Academy. Many of the auditing students present recognized these 5 and knew that their identities were different from theirs. They were official students of the Black Moon Combat Academy, and because of this, their gazes were filled with envy and reverence as they looked at the five of them. That person wearing a blue combat uniform is called Blue Pool. It's said that he's already a cultivator at the 4th level of the Chi refining stage and is extremely powerful. No wonder he can become an official student. Although Blue Pool is very strong, that girl wearing black clothes over there is stronger. She's the first daughter of the Long family. Tisk is that the Long family that claims to be the #1 talisman array master family in the Federation. Long Xiao might not be the strongest in terms of cultivation, but in terms of talisman array talent, she's definitely #1. While everyone was discussing these 5 super geniuses, Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan were anxiously looking left and right in the crowd, hoping to find Qin Chuan's figure. However, to their disappointment, Qin Chuan wasn't in the plaza at all. How can this be? Su and Jing was somewhat worried. All the new students are here. How can he not be here? Chapter 126. Only audit students and official students have the qualifications to stand in this square. That guy isn't here because he was eliminated. Maybe he's already dead. Just as Su and Jing was worried about Qin Chuan's situation, a sarcastic voice suddenly echoed in her ears. Fei Nan had a complacent expression as he slowly walked in front of Su and Jing and sneered, "I told you that Qin Chuan didn't have any real ability, but you didn't listen. Now you can see that he doesn't even have the qualifications to be an audit student. Ha!" Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan were worried that Qin Chuan wouldn't be around, but Fei Nan was pleased that Qin Chuan wouldn't be around. A villain intoxicated by success. Hu Dingshan saw Fei Nan's arrogant appearance and couldn't help but snort, unwilling to waste any more words with Fei Nan. "Hu Dingshan, you're mocking and ridiculing me now, but you'll be begging me later." Fei Nan gloomily looked at Hu Dingshan, then at Su and Jing and sneered. "You probably don't know, right? If audit students want to have a good life in the Black Moon Combat Academy, they have to rely on official students. Coincidentally, a few days ago, I inadvertently helped Blue Pool, and he was willing to shelter me in school. At that time, I mentioned the 2 of you to him and said that you were bewitched by Qin Chuan. He also sympathized with you. Now that Qin Chuan has most likely died in the Black Moon Mountain Range, if you don't want to be bullied in school, it's best that you listen to me. That way, Blue Pool might also shelter you on my account." After saying this, Fei Nan's face couldn't help but reveal a hint of pride. While others were still quietly sizing up those 5 official students with reverence, he had already established a good relationship with Blue Pool and became friends. Just based on this, who would dare to look down on him in school in the future? "You're just a dog, yet you're acting so proud." Hu Dingshan disdainfully snorted. "You're willing to be a dog, but I'm not. Hu Dingshan, don't be so shameless." Fei Nan's face suddenly darkened. "You've offended me. In the future, I have 100 ways to make your life in school miserable. Up to you." Hu Dingshan didn't put Fei Nan's threat in his eyes. He looked down on Fei Nan's smug face. "Xiao Jing, what do you think?" Fei Nan no longer paid attention to Hu Dingshan. Instead, he turned his gaze to Su and Jing. From beginning to end, his goal was only Su and Jing. Su and Jing took a deep look at Fei Nan and said, "Please don't call me Little Jing. We aren't familiar with each other." "Ha, good. Very good." Hearing this, Fei Nan angrily laughed. He pointed at Su and Jing and said with a sinister expression, "You will regret this." After saying this, Fei Nan turned around and walked toward Blue Pool, who was standing not far away. Seeing this scene, Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan suddenly had a bad premonition. Fei Nan's actions also attracted other people's attention. He was the first auditing student who dared to step forward and greet the official students. Facing everyone's surprised and curious gazes, Fei Nan was extremely proud. At the same time, he hated Hu Dingshan and Su and Jing to the core. "I gave you face, but you didn't want it. I'll let you know the price of provoking me." Fei Nan slowly walked to Blue Pool's side. The gloomy expression on his face instantly changed into a smile. He said to Blue Pool in a low voice, "Master Zhe, I just want to look for my 2 companions. I wanted them to work for you with me, but they said they wanted to work with someone called Chuan. They also said that compared to Chuan, you are nothing. I really didn't expect them to say such things. I apologize to you on their behalf. I hope Master Zay won't take offense and can let them off this time. Blue Pool indifferently looked at Fei Nan, who was pretending to be helpless. He remained silent and didn't immediately respond. But the invisible pressure contained in that gaze made Fei Nan's forehead drip with sweat, and his complexion paled. Seeing that Fei Nan's mind was about to collapse, Blue Pool finally retracted his gaze and said indifferently, I'll give you one last chance. Reorganize your words. I want to hear the truth. Hearing this, Fei Nan felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He didn't dare to distort the truth and hurriedly said, They really don't want to follow you. They say they don't want to be someone's dog. Moreover, it's true that they want to follow Chuan. Chuan. Blue Pool softly muttered this somewhat familiar name. He said to Fei Nan, This Chuan, is he that Chuan from the state capital of Qing? Yes, he is also a Black Moon badge holder. He signed up for the official examination, but he hasn't appeared in this square. He should be dead. Dead? What a pity. Blue Pool didn't feel that Fei Nan's deduction was wrong. If Chuan was still alive, why hadn't he appeared in the square yet? After sighing with emotion, Blue Pool took a deep look at Fei Nan and said, In this world, no one dares to deceive me like I'm a fool. Don't let this kind of thing happen a second time, understand? Understood. Fei Nan immediately nodded in agreement. At this time, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Blue Pool didn't pursue the matter. Otherwise, his future days would be very difficult. Just as Fei Nan thought this matter was over, Blue Pool suddenly lifted his foot and walked towards Su Wenjing and Hu Dingshan. His action instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. Su Wenjing and Hu Dingshan looked as if they were facing a great enemy, their expressions vigilant and apprehensive. Blue Pool slowly walked in front of Su Wenjing and Hu Dingshan, softly saying, The two of you from now on, follow Fei Nan and work for me. Hearing Blue Pool's tone as if he was giving alms, Su Wenjing's expression became somewhat unsightly. Student, we came to study, not to be someone's servant. Student, hearing how Su Wenjing addressed him, Blue Pool sneered, disdainfully saying, Only official students have the qualifications to be my student. You don't have the qualifications. You don't think that auditing students have the qualifications to enjoy the same learning treatment as official students, do you? Before coming to take the exam, didn't you seriously inquire about the school's rules? What do you mean? Su Wenjing suddenly had an ominous premonition. According to the school's rules, official students have the qualifications to choose 4 people from auditing students to be their study companions. The 4 chosen people don't have the qualifications to refuse. If you don't want to, then just drop out of school. Blue Pool indifferently looked at Su Wenjing and said, I'm only exercising my authority as an official student. It's not against the school's rules. The moment Blue Pool's words fell, a commotion broke out in the square. No one had expected official students to have such special privileges. Chapter 127. Hearing Blue Pool's words, Su Wenjing and Hu Dingshan's expressions became extremely gloomy. They really didn't know that the school had such a rule. It would be fine if they were to be the study companions of other official students, but it just had to be Blue Pool. And from what Blue Pool said, they would have to obey Fei Nan's orders in the future. How could they accept this? Fei Nan followed behind Blue Pool, looking at Hu Dingshan and Su Wenjing with an arrogant expression. He was extremely pleased. He wanted to let Su Wenjing and Hu Dingshan know how painful the price of offending him was. Facing Blue Pool's indifferent expression and Fei Nan's arrogant smile, Su Wenjing and Hu Dingshan felt extremely depressed. They had passed the difficult exam with great difficulty to become auditing students of the Black Moon Combat Academy. If they were to drop out because of a study companion, then what would be the point of all their hard work? How would they be able to face their relatives who had high hopes for them? As an official student, Blue Pool wasn't someone that auditing students could contend against. Right now, they could only place their hopes on the other official students, but the others clearly didn't intend to interfere in this matter. Clearly, no one was willing to form a grudge with Blue Pool over two insignificant auditing students. What? You're not willing? Blue Pool slightly narrowed his eyes and coldly said, if Qin Xuan requested to be your study companion, would you refuse? Hearing Blue Pool suddenly mention Qin Xuan, Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan were somewhat startled. How did this matter involve Qin Xuan again? Seeing the change in Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan's expressions, Blue Pool's face couldn't help but turn cold. He said in a deep voice, it seems that in your hearts, I, Blue Pool, can't compare to dead cripple. Since that's the case, then you should drop out. I don't want to see you in school. Blue Pool's few words were equivalent to deciding Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan's lives. If they didn't drop out, it would be equivalent to not giving Blue Pool face. With Blue Pool's power, he definitely had 10,000 ways to make them wish they were dead. This also made the surrounding crowd clearly understand how terrifying the privileges of being an official student of the Black Moon Combat Academy were. Compared to dropping out of school, becoming an official student study companion wasn't that hard to accept. Su and Jing's face was ashen. Compared to becoming someone's study companion and being ordered around by Feinin every day, she would rather drop out. If Qin Xuan was here, he would definitely be willing. Buzz! While everyone was discussing about the matter of being a study companion, the teleportation array suddenly flickered. Seeing this scene, everyone's attentions to it. Could it be that there were new students came? Even the teachers secretly watching was watching the teleportation array looks size. What was this situation? The Blue Pool to the Teleportation Combat Academy. TSST, SC, the T2 to this point. 2. T. Est. T. S's was to be. Was to T. T's S's S2 it to live. Chun Chongxing, I'll have to trouble you to shut up. So noisy. The tall girl impatiently looked at the skinny youth and said, if you disturb Qin Xuan, I won't let you off. I was a bit too excited. I didn't expect the teleportation array to actually work. The skinny youth laughed mischievously. He suddenly opened his arms and loudly shouted, Azure Ancient City, Black Moon Combat Academy, tremble. I, Chun Chongxing, have come. At this time, the teachers hiding in the dark finally recognized the 4 people who had appeared in the square through the teleportation array. They were actually the 4 super geniuses that had disappeared after entering the Cursed Land. Chun Chongxing, Lu Zi, Baiyu, and Qin Xuan. Everyone in the square looked at Qin Xuan's group of 4, who looked like beggars. Their expressions were somewhat stunned. What was going on? Qin Xuan, just as everyone was in a daze, Hu Dingshan and Su and Jing, who had been forced into a corner by Blue Pool, seemed to have seen a new ray of hope. They couldn't help but cry out in surprise and quickly walked towards Qin Xuan's group. Seeing Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan, Lu Zi smiled and said, so it's you guys. Looks like you guys have passed the test. Congratulations. You guys are, looking at Lu Zi, who was wrapped in bandages and looked somewhat haggard, and then looking at Qin Xuan, who was being carried on Lu Zi's back. Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan were filled with curiosity. What on earth had happened? This experience is hard to explain in a few words. Lu Zi sighed softly and said, Qin Xuan is injured and unconscious. He won't be able to greet you guys for the time being. However, I think he'll be very happy to see you guys when he wakes up. Hearing this, Hu Dingshan smiled bitterly and said, but we're about to be forced to drop out of school. Lu Zi raised her brows in surprise and asked why. Because of me. Just then, Blue Pool walked over slowly. He glanced at Qin Xuan's group of 4 and said calmly, I'm Blue Pool. Lu Zi, I recognize you. Seeing Blue Pool appear, Lu Zi felt a little puzzled and asked, did they offend you? No, I just wanted them to be my study companions. Blue Pool's gaze swept across Lu Zi and eventually landed on Qin Xuan, who was on Lu Zi's back. Looking at the unconscious Qin Xuan, who was covered in dirt, he said, this is Qin Xuan? He looks very ordinary. What did you say? Chun Chongxing, who was standing at the side, picked his ear and walked up to Blue Pool. If Qin Xuan is ordinary, then you're a fart. Chun Chongxing was filthy from head to toe and hadn't washed up for several tens of days. The moment he opened his mouth, a puff of stench came out, causing Blue Pool to frown deeply. He said in a deep voice, "Are you provoking me? Heh, if you said that I'm ordinary, then so be it. But how dare you say that my big brother is ordinary? If I don't kill you and wait until my big brother wakes up, won't I, as his underling, lose a lot of face?" Chun Chongqing let out a cold laugh, and his gaze suddenly turned chilly as he looked at Blue Pool. His murderous intent filled his eyes, as if it could gush out at any moment. At the sight of this scene, everyone in the square was extremely astonished. No one had expected that these four people, who appeared in the square covered in dirt, would have the guts to go head-to-head with Blue Pool. Moreover, from the looks of it, Blue Pool was rather wary of them. Everyone involuntarily turned their gazes toward Qin Chuan, who was on Lu Zi's back. Qin Chuan. They had heard this name being mentioned several times in the square. Who exactly was this person? Chapter 128. Just as everyone thought that a great battle was about to erupt between Blue Pool and Chun Chongqing, the white-haired girl who had been silent all this while suddenly took a step forward and stood in front of Blue Pool. She said indifferently, "Scram." The girl gazed at Blue Pool calmly, but Blue Pool felt as though he was facing a prehistoric beast. Even his breathing became difficult, and he involuntarily took 2 steps back. Seeing this scene, everyone in the square couldn't help but gasp. Blue Pool, who was still incomparably domineering earlier, actually retreated after being scolded by this white-haired girl. What shocked everyone even more was the girl's next words. "I don't like people disturbing Qin Chuan's rest. SSSS." Everyone couldn't help but feel their scalps tingle. The reason why this white-haired girl scolded Blue Pool was because she didn't want people to disturb Qin Chuan's rest. Who exactly was this Qin Chuan? Even the other 4 official students were extremely curious about Qin Chuan's group of 4, especially the unconscious Qin Chuan and the indifferent Baiyu. Not only did her scolding not anger Blue Pool, but it also made him take 2 steps back in fear. This wasn't something that just anyone could do. Just then, the mentors who came after hearing the news finally appeared one after another, causing the noisy square to instantly quieten down. The mentors, who were wearing the same black uniforms, looked at Qin Chuan's group of 4 standing in the transportation array with astonishment in their eyes. They had thought that Qin Chuan's group of 4 had died in the Cursed Land, but these 4 little fellows actually came out alive. Not only that, they even came here directly through the transportation array. How on earth did they do it? Swoosh! The sound of something cutting through the air rang. Immediately after, 2 beautiful figures, one tall and one short, appeared next to the transportation array. These 2 were none other than Ningya and Su Yuluo, who had rushed over at full speed after hearing the news. Looking at Qin Chuan, who was being carried on Lu Zi's back, Ningya suddenly laughed. "Not bad, not bad. I really didn't misjudge you." "Amazing, really amazing." Su Yuluo floated in the air and said with a smile, "It seems that I have to choose my students from among them." "Ningya, Su Yuluo, what are you doing?" Among the group of instructors who had arrived earlier, a slightly plump middle-aged man slowly walked up to them and said, "As instructors, you have to pay attention to your image in front of the students." "Oh." Ningya glanced at the chubby man indifferently and said, "Zhao Kuei, is there anything else?" "Of course." Zhao Kuei chuckled and said, "According to the rules, the assessment has already ended. The students who don't appear on the square on time will automatically be considered as having been expelled. I think you should understand what I mean, right?" Hearing this, Su Yuluo pouted cutely and said, "But the 4 of them are in a special situation. The assessment also ended early. Rules are rules. The reason why it ended early is also because of rules. No one could be an exception." Zhao Kuei threw a discreet glance at Blue Pool, then turned his gaze to Qin Chuan and the other 3. He said, "I suggest we send them to the Elf City first. After that, we'll hold a meeting to decide on their fate." "No." At this moment, Lu Zi suddenly stood up and said in a deep voice, "Qin Chuan is injured. He needs to receive treatment as soon as possible. This student, although your grandfather is an instructor in our school, this doesn't mean that you have special privileges. Other than the students of the Black Moon Combat Academy, no one else has the right to use any of the Academy's resources. Zhao Kuei smiled kindly, but his words were extremely unreasonable. Clearly, he didn't want Qin Chuan to receive treatment so soon. I remember that according to the rules, if the super geniuses who are participating in the official assessment are unable to arrive at school on time due to special reasons, they can make up for it with spiritual beads. Ningyu suddenly took a deep look at Zhao Kuei and said indifferently, I don't think this is against the rules. Haha, of course not. Zhao Kuei laughed and said, according to the rules, the super geniuses who are late for the official assessment have to hand over 10 spiritual beads as compensation for every minute they are late. They were late for a total of 6 minutes. So, according to the rules, each person has to hand over an extra 60 spiritual beads. Do you think that the 4 of them have 240 spiritual beads? This rule had been in place for a long time, but there had never been any super geniuses who were unable to arrive on time due to special reasons who were able to hand over their spiritual beads. Zhao Kuei didn't think that Qin Chuan's group of 4 were an exception. One had to know that this was a total of 240 spiritual beads. Even if it was him, he might not be able to collect so many spiritual pearls during the assessment. At this moment, many of the spectating students in the plaza were inquiring about what spiritual beads were. Fei Nan, who was in the know, sneered and said, you can only obtain spiritual beads by killing mountain ghosts. 1 mountain ghost is equivalent to 1 spiritual bead. Even with Master Zai's strength, he only managed to kill 7 mountain ghosts and obtained 7 spiritual beads. With just the 4 of them, how could they possibly obtain 240 spiritual beads? Hearing this, Blue Pool's face couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. He dared to confirm that his 7 spiritual beads could definitely be ranked in the top 3 among the official students. Hearing Fei Nan's explanation, everyone couldn't help but be somewhat shocked. They didn't expect that spiritual beads could only be obtained by killing the legendary mountain ghosts. With Blue Pool's strength, he only obtained 7 spiritual beads. No matter how strong Qin Chuan's group of 4 was, they couldn't possibly obtain 240 spiritual beads, right? If that was the case, wouldn't Qin Chuan's group of 4 be expelled from the school because they were late for 6 minutes? While Blue Pool was feeling happy, Fei Nan was feeling proud, and everyone was feeling regretful. Chun Chongqing opened his mouth and spat on the ground. Damn it! I was still wondering what the spiritual beads you were talking about were. I was worried for half a day. Isn't it just those green beads? 240 spiritual beads. Bah, we have plenty. While speaking, Chun Chongqing took off the backpack on his back, then flipped it around and shook it. A large pile of spiritual beads fell out of the backpack like rain, covering the ground at Chun Chongqing's feet. Looking at the pile of spiritual beads at Chun Chongqing's feet, everyone felt as if their throats were being squeezed. Their eyes were wide open, and they were completely silent. If these aren't enough, there's more. Lu Zi casually kicked the backpack on the ground. The backpack fell to the ground, and a large pile of spiritual beads fell out. With a rough glance, there were no less than 100 spiritual beads. Adding the pile at Chun Chongqing's feet, not to mention 240 spiritual beads, there were almost 420 spiritual beads. Chapter 129. Is this enough? If it's not enough, I'll take some more from my pocket. Seeing everyone's shocked expressions, Chun Chongqing curled his lips and said disdainfully, some people are so arrogant just because they obtained 7 spiritual pearls. Are 7 pearls a lot? Along the way, I've already lost more than 7 pearls like marbles. When everyone heard Chun Chongqing's words, they couldn't help but look at the flushed Blue Pool. Their expressions were extremely strange. Compared to the gains of Qin Chuan and the other 3, Blue Pool's mere 7 spiritual pearls were nothing. Faced with everyone's strange gazes, Blue Pool was ashamed and indignant. He tried his best and barely obtained 7 spiritual pearls. He had thought that his gains would be enough to rank him in the top 3 among the official students. However, compared to Qin Chuan and the other 3, his gains weren't even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Although Ningya was the one who suggested handing over spiritual pearls to pass the test, her original intention was to let Qin Chuan and the other 3 get together and solve Qin Chuan's problem first. She never expected that Qin Chuan and the other 3 would be able to take out so many spiritual pearls. Did they wipe out all the mountain ghosts in the Cursed Lands? Zhao Kuei, do you think these spiritual pearls are enough? After Ningya recovered from her shock, she slowly calmed down. She looked at Zhao Kuei playfully and said, "If you think it's not enough, then pretend I never mentioned this matter. We'll send them to the Elf City first and do things according to your suggestion." Hearing this, Zhao Kuei forced a smile on his chubby face and said to Ningya, "Rules are rules. Since they can hand over their spiritual pearls, they've passed the official test and are now official students of our Black Moon Combat Academy. I'll leave the rest to you guys. I still have things to do, so I'll take my leave first." After saying that, Zhao Kuei left. The moment he turned around, his expression was terrifyingly gloomy. "I'll leave the matter of counting the spiritual pearls to you guys. I still have to bring Qin Chuan to receive treatment." Ningya glanced at the other mentors, then raised her hand and tapped lightly at Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. She then led them into the air. On the other hand, Baiyu slowly walked to a corner of the plaza and sat down quietly, completely ignoring the curious and reverent gazes that were directed at her. "I don't need any treatment, nor do I need a rest. I'll just stay here and watch over you." Chun Chongqing looked at the few teachers in front of him and said, "You can pick out 240 spiritual pearls and take them away. The rest is still ours." In the past, Chun Chongqing didn't know what the spirit bead was for, but now he felt that he seemed to have figured out something. In any case, it should be quite valuable. When the instructors saw Chun Chongqing's arrogant look, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the first time they had seen such an arrogant student. However, looking at the spiritual pearls all over the ground and thinking about Chun Chongqing's identity, he did indeed have the qualifications to be arrogant. With that, Chun Chongqing suddenly turned his head to look at Su Yuluo, who was still floating in the air, and said with a smile, "Little girl, are you the sister of the mentor in the Chong Sam just now? Your sister is really sexy." Hearing Chun Chongqing's words, the instructors who were counting the spiritual pearls couldn't help but look up at Chun Chongqing with astonishment. This kid was a little too bold. Su Yuluo giggled and asked Chun Chongqing, "Then do you think I'm prettier or my sister?" Chun Chongqing frowned and pondered for a moment, then answered very seriously, "Although your sister is also very pretty and sexy, I like young Lolas, so in my heart, you're the prettiest. The cultivation system is the most worth looking forward to. But then again, why are you floating in the sky?" Chun Chongqing was very curious. Wasn't it tiring to keep flying with the flying magic treasure? Su Yuluo smiled and said to Chun Chongqing, "Ever since I advanced to the golden core stage, I've been floating in the sky. I'm already used to it." "I see. Wait." Chun Chongqing looked at the charmingly naive Su Yuluo in astonishment. He felt terrible. Golden core stage. "Well, I still have something to do. I'll go first." Chun Chongqing was about to slip away when he realized that he couldn't move his body. Looking at the smiling Su Yuluo, Chun Chongqing was about to cry. If he had known that Su Yuluo was an expert at the golden core stage, he wouldn't have dared to be so presumptuous. "Bye-bye. I'm going to check on Qin Chuan's situation." Su Yuluo giggled, turned around, and flew away. After she left, Chun Chongqing was still standing stiffly in place, completely unable to move. When the others saw Chun Chongqing's unlucky appearance, they all gloated. "Who asked you to dare to tease a golden core stage instructor? Serve you right." At this time, there wasn't much excitement to watch in the square, but the crowd was still discussing the matter of Qin Chuan and the other 3. Qin Chuan was especially the center of the topic. After all, anyone could see that whether it was Chun Chongqing, Baiyu, or Lu Zi, they all followed Qin Chuan's lead. After some people deliberately asked Su and Jing and Hu Dingshan, Qin Chuan's identity finally surfaced. This Qin Chuan was the Qing state capital's Qin Chuan who had amazed everyone in the Hidden Dragon Arena. When they found out that this Qin Chuan was the Qin Chuan, everyone was shocked. They all thought that Qin Chuan would apply for the Cosmic Sky Academy. No one had expected that Qin Chuan would actually appear in the Black Moon Combat Academy. This is Qin Chuan. No matter where he goes, he's an influential figure. Hu Dingshan lamented to Su and Jing, who was beside him. If not for Qin Chuan's timely appearance today, the two of us would probably have to drop out of school. Su and Jing looked at the gloomy blue pool with a complicated gaze. Although he was angry, he didn't dare to say anything. When she thought of how they were forced into a corner by Blue Pool, she couldn't help but sigh faintly. Qin Chuan, he only overused his mental strength. His body is fine. Ningya glanced at Qin Chuan, who was lying in the healing pod, and then turned her gaze to Lu Zi. I didn't expect that you guys would be able to walk out of the cursed land alive. Cursed land? Are you talking about that black forest? Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze and said in a low voice, "To be honest, I don't know how he walked out. If not for Qin Chuan, Lu Zi was 100% sure that she would have died in the cursed land. She definitely wouldn't have been able to leave alive. In the past, the super geniuses who participated in the official assessment would exit the cursed land not long after entering. We thought that the four of you would do the same, so we didn't pay much attention to it and allowed you guys to enter. However, we didn't expect that you guys wouldn't come out after entering. When we realized that something was amiss and went to look for you guys had already disappeared." Ningya was very curious about what Qin Chuan and the other three had experienced in the cursed land. However, she knew that now wasn't the time to talk about this. Everything had to wait until Qin Chuan woke up. Chapter 130. Qin Chuan, who was still unconscious, did not know that he had become an influential figure among the freshmen before he had even done anything. Even the seniors from the previous batch had vaguely heard of his name. After all, not everyone could be so stubborn as to take out a large pile of spirit pearls in the face of the school's persuasion. By the time Qin Chuan woke up, it was already late at night. He slowly opened his eyes and looked outside the healing pod. The first thing he saw was Ningya, who was sitting quietly on a chair. "You're awake?" Ningya smiled as she looked at Qin Chuan. She reached out to close the healing pod and said to Qin Chuan, "Congratulations, you are now an official student of the Black Moon Combat Academy. You don't have to worry about your companions. Other than Chen Changxing, who might catch a cold, Lu Zi and Baiyu are fine." Looking at the curvy Ningya in front of him, Qin Chuan walked out of the healing pod. He could not help but roll his eyes and say, "Your Black Moon Combat Academy is so deceitful, and you're the most deceitful. You could have passed the assessment by killing the mountain ghost and obtaining a spirit bead, but you insisted that we pass through the Black Moon mountain range and arrive at the academy by ourselves. Isn't this clearly?" Qin Chuan looked at the sharp talisman pen that had suddenly appeared in front of him and suddenly shut his mouth. "Who did you say was the most deceitful?" Ningya slowly stood up and walked in front of Qin Chuan. She looked at Qin Chuan with a smile and asked, "I didn't hear you clearly. Can you say it again?" "I was wrong." Qin Chuan straightforwardly admitted his mistake. He should not have ridiculed Ningya in front of her. "It's good that you know your mistake." Ningya put away the talisman pen and gently pinched Qin Chuan's shoulder. She said, "From now on, you are my student." Qin Chuan was stunned when he heard this. He asked, "You want to be my homeroom teacher?" "Not your homeroom teacher, but your personal mentor." Ningya corrected Qin Chuan's misunderstanding and said, "In other words, we are now master and disciple. You are now my only direct disciple." "Then who is the other one?" Qin Chuan asked curiously. He wanted to know who was as unlucky as him to have been targeted by a demoness like Ningya. "Dead," Ningya said with some regret. Maybe the learning plan I gave him was too overbearing. He couldn't hold on and died. Qin Chuan was silent for a moment and asked, "Do I have the right to refuse?" "Unfortunately, no." Ningya sat down again and pointed in front of her. She said to Qin Chuan, kneel down and kowtow to your master. Actually, that I thump, bang, bang, bang. Before Qin Chuan could finish his words, his body had already uncontrollably knelt in front of Ningya. Bang, 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 he kowtowed 3 times. This was considered the completion of the apprenticeship ceremony, and he had officially become Ningya's disciple. Your forehead is red. It must be very painful. Don't you know how to be gentle? Ningya looked at Qin Chuan's red forehead with concern. She seemed to be distressed. Qin Chuan grinned. He didn't know whether to curse or not. You have offended a lot of people today. Ningya looked at Qin Chuan playfully and said, if you don't have me as your teacher to protect you, I'm afraid you won't have a good time in school. Qin Chuan was a little confused. He had only just woken up. How did he offend people? Seeing that Qin Chuan was a little confused, Ningya briefly told Qin Chuan what had happened in the square today. Hearing Ningya's description, Qin Chuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was really a case of being in trouble at home. He hadn't done anything when he was unconscious, yet he had offended a teacher and a classmate. What the hell was this? But don't worry. With me around, Zhao Kuei won't be able to do anything to you. What you need to be wary of is malicious revenge from your classmates. You have to settle matters between students by yourself. I won't interfere. Ningya smiled and said to Qin Chuan, if you don't want Blue Pool to take revenge on you, then it's best that you successfully become the class monitor. Hearing this, Qin Chuan asked curiously, what are the benefits of becoming the class monitor? It can't be just to prevent Blue Pool from making things difficult for me after becoming the class monitor, right? Your teacher will have a lot of face. No way. Qin Chuan shook his head without hesitation. What a joke. Is your face that valuable? If you become the class monitor, you'll get an extra 30% more cultivation resources than ordinary students. I don't think there's anyone more suitable than me to be the class monitor among the freshmen. Qin Chuan had a serious look on his face. Teacher, your face is indeed very valuable. Ningya looked at the speed at which Qin Chuan's expression changed and smiled playfully. You're indeed as greedy as the rumors say. I wonder if you're also lustful? As she spoke, Ningya's long and slender legs wrapped in thin black stockings gently crossed each other. Through the slit in her chong sam, her exaggerated and seductive curves were presented before Qin Chuan's eyes. See no evil. Seeing this, Qin Chuan immediately raised his hand to cover his eyes. However, the gaps between his fingers were wide open. His eyes sneakily glanced at Ningya's round and slender legs, not hiding anything at all. Tell me, how did you guys enter the Cursed Lands, and how did you obtain so many spiritual pearls? Ningya straightened her legs and covered the seductive scenery, then began to ask about serious matters. Can I not say? Qin Chuan was a little troubled. This matter was related to Baiyu's secret, and also his secret. If he could not say it, it was better not to say it. Although Ningya was now his teacher, logically speaking, he didn't particularly trust her. Ningya didn't seem to be surprised by Qin Chuan's words. She looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, you have the right to remain silent. The school has no reason to force you to reveal your secrets. Qin Chuan was slightly relieved. Then, he heard Ningya continue, but just because I don't ask and the school doesn't ask, doesn't mean that others won't ask. Do you understand what I mean? Qin Chuan understood. Not everyone would respect their privacy. There would definitely be people who would think of ways to pry open their mouths. In order to ensure the safety of you and the people around you, you only need to do one thing. That is to do your best to show off and let the school recognize your value. Only then will you be valued by the school, and at the same time, receive the school's protection. Only then will those people not dare to force you too much and brazenly make a move on you. Of course, as your teacher, I will also have more face. Ningya reached out and gently patted Qin Chuan's shoulder. She smiled and said, work hard, young man. This world is more complicated and dark than you think. If you continue to be so weak, you may really die. Will I die? Qin Chuan grinned. If I die, then I will have more motivation to work hard to cultivate. Chapter 131. The next morning, Qin Chuan had yet to wake up when he was shaken awake by Lu Zi. "Little Chuan, how's your body?" Lu Zi sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Qin Chuan, who was still in a daze. She said to Qin Chuan, "Yesterday, my grandfather came to find me, so I left first. I wasn't able to stay by your side the entire time." Qin Chuan sat up and stretched. He said to Lu Zi, "I'm fine. I'm fine." Ever since he had woken up yesterday, other than being a little unhappy that Ningya had forced him to become her disciple, everything else was fine. "I heard on the way here that you've already been accepted as Teacher Ning's direct disciple." Lu Zi saw that Qin Chuan's body was fine and smiled. "My grandfather once told me that Teacher Ning is a very powerful person." Qin Chuan was a little speechless. "Is she very powerful?" "I don't think so. You don't know how lucky you are. Do you know how many people have wanted to become Teacher Ning's disciple, but they were all rejected by her? You are the only disciple she has accepted." "The only one?" Qin Chuan was stunned for a moment. Didn't she say that there was also an unlucky senior who had died? However, after thinking about it, Qin Chuan understood that the so-called unlucky senior who had died from studying was probably something that Ningya had made up to deceive him. He had been deceived by Ningya once again. "I'm still too naive." Qin Chuan sighed. Compared to a demoness like Ningya, his little bit of ability was clearly not enough. "Hurry up and get up. We only have one day to familiarize ourselves with the environment. Tomorrow, we will officially enter the academy." Lu Zi urged Qin Chuan to get up. Although her grandfather was one of the academy's instructors, this was her first time in the Black Moon Combat Academy, so she was very curious about everything here. Today, she and Qin Chuan would take a good look around the academy. The Azure Ancient City had a history of 10,000 years since its establishment. The exact time could no longer be verified. Although the Azure Ancient City had been renovated several times, it still maintained the appearance of 10,000 years ago to a large extent. Everywhere was filled with an ancient and desolate aura. In the beginning, the Black Moon Combat Academy was a rather famous talisman array master organization in the Azure Ancient City. After 1,000 years of development, it evolved into the Black Moon Combat Academy and became a university that specialized in cultivating talisman array masters in the Azure Ancient City. After that, the fame of the Black Moon Combat Academy gradually spread throughout the Federation. Countless geniuses of the Tao of talisman arrays came to study at the Black Moon Combat Academy. As time passed, more and more talisman array masters were nurtured by the Black Moon Combat Academy, and their influence in the Federation grew. Today, the Black Moon Combat Academy was one of the 6 great academies of the Federation and had become a paradise for talisman array masters. Gradually, no one mentioned the name of the Azure Ancient City anymore. Now, the Azure Ancient City was the Black Moon Combat Academy, and the Black Moon Combat Academy was the Azure Ancient City. The Azure Ancient City is located in the center of the Black Moon Mountain Range and is almost isolated from the rest of the world. It's normal for outsiders to not know about it. Walking on the Bluestone Street, Qin Chuan's eyes were filled with curiosity as he looked at the ground beneath his feet. Ever since he was young, this was the first time he had seen a street that was purely made of bluestone. 50 years ago, the Black Moon Combat Academy's reputation in the Federation could even surpass that of Star Dragon's #1 academy. But now the Black Moon Combat Academy is getting worse and worse. Lu Zi sighed and said to Qin Chuan, "Do you know why?" Qin Chuan did not understand this, so he shook his head and asked, "Why?" In the past, the Black Moon Combat Academy had always taken the responsibility of nurturing array masters. No matter if it was a battle formation master or an auxiliary array master, the Black Moon Combat Academy would nurture them wholeheartedly. At that time, the Black Moon Combat Academy had about 1,000 official students every year. But 50 years ago, the Black Moon Combat Academy suddenly changed its original teaching objective. It no longer nurtured auxiliary array masters, but instead focused on nurturing battle formation masters. This change surprised many people and caused many people to object to it. However, the dean and the many elders of the council used their absolute strength to suppress the voices of dissatisfaction and opposition, and started to implement the new policy. That year, more than 10,000 students applied for the Black Moon Combat Academy, but only 62 were accepted as official students. Every year after that, fewer and fewer people were accepted as official students. Today, the total number of official students in the Black Moon Combat Academy is less than 100. Lucy faintly looked ahead and whispered, 20 years ago, the Black Moon Combat Academy gradually declined. In order to maintain the Academy's popularity and continue to recruit Talisman Array geniuses, the Dean and the Council had no choice but to change their teaching strategy and begin to recruit audit students. But even so, the Black Moon Combat Academy situation did not improve much. Back then, I chose to give up on applying for the Black Moon Combat Academy because I could not see the Academy's future. I also could not see my own future. After hearing Lucy speak so much, Qinchuan finally understood the Black Moon Combat Academy's current situation. He was very curious as to why the Black Moon Combat Academy had suddenly changed their teaching policy 50 years ago and began to focus on nurturing battle formation masters. This change was a little too sudden. Even your grandfather doesn't know the inside story. My grandfather is only an ordinary teacher. If there's anyone who knows the inside story, then it's definitely the dean and the elders in the council. But with your teacher's position in the academy, she might know some inside stories. Even if she knows the inside story, she might not tell me. Qinchuan curled his lips and suddenly thought of something. He turned to Lu Zi and asked, "Did your grandfather ask you anything about us in the Cursed Lands?" "No, my grandfather did not mention anything about the Cursed Lands at all." Lu Zi looked at Qinchuan with a subtle expression and said, he didn't seem to be surprised that we could enter the Cursed Lands and come out. Qinchuan was slightly stunned when he heard this. It seemed that Lu Zi's grandfather was not as ignorant as Lu Zi had said. "That's right. Do you plan on running for class monitor?" Lu Zi suddenly smiled and said, "With your greedy behavior in the special training camp, I don't think you'll let go of the class monitor's benefits." Qinchuan awkwardly coughed and said, "I just feel that the class monitor is such an important position. It's better to let someone with ability take it." Lu Zi chuckled and lightly tapped Qinchuan's shoulder. She said, "Is it that hard to admit that you're greedy and lecherous?" "Who said I'm lecherous?" Qinchuan felt that he had been greatly wronged. "Don't tell me you don't know." Lu Zi seemed to be surprised. The greedy and lecherous Qin Xiaochuan's name has already spread among the freshmen. Qinchuan was dumbfounded. Was this the reason why she had called him Xiaochuan this morning? "I've been wronged." Chapter 132. Even without thinking, Qinchuan knew that Ningya must have deliberately spread the name of the greedy and lecherous Qin Xiaochuan. When he thought of Ningya, Qinchuan gnashed his teeth in anger, but there was nothing he could do. In the past, he could still scold her for fun, but now, if he dared to disrespect Ningya, he would be disrespecting his teacher. Who would be able to withstand such a huge accusation? Today, besides shopping, Qinchuan and Lu Zi had another mission, which was to connect their photon processor chips to the Black Moon Combat Academy's intranet. This way, they would be able to log in to the school's forum at any time and read the latest news released by the school. If auditing students wanted to connect to the school's intranet, they would need to go to the school's network management office. However, Qinchuan and Lu Zi were official students, and they could directly use their Black Moon Combat badges to connect to the school's intranet. Beep. Activating fingerprint and iris scan. Identity verified. Welcome student number 001, Qinchuan, to connect to the school's intranet. Number 001? Lu Zi looked at Qinchuan with astonishment and said, "You're actually number 001. Qinchuan saw Lu Zi's astonishment and asked curiously, "What? Does this student number have a special meaning?" "As far as I know, the student number ranking is equivalent to a ranking of strength. Simply put, the school thinks that you're the strongest among the new students, so you're number 001. Lu Zi finished connecting to the school's intranet as she explained to Qinchuan. Her student number was 005. There were a total of 9 official students, and Lu Zi was ranked 5th. She was neither too high nor too low, and was just average. So be it. It's just a student number anyway. Seeing Qin Chuan's indifferent expression, Lu Zi bitterly smiled and said, "Tomorrow, when school officially starts, you'll know the benefits and difficulties of having a high student number ranking." "What do you mean?" Qin Chuan frowned. Did this student number ranking have other meanings? "Look at this first." Lu Zi opened the school's intranet and clicked on a post. She said to Qin Chuan, "This is a test that the school just released on the school's intranet. For the entire day tomorrow, auditing students have the qualifications to challenge official students without limit. As long as they defeat any official student, auditing students can obtain the opportunity to become official students. But if an official student is defeated 3 times in a day, then they will lose their official student status and become auditing students. In the Black Moon Combat Academy, those who have the qualifications to become auditing students are all geniuses. Geniuses are inevitably arrogant and do not feel that they are weaker than others. When tomorrow comes, how many auditing students do you think will challenge freshman 001 to prove their strength? Can I set a rule?" Qin Chuan felt a headache coming on. There were so many auditing students. If they all challenged him, wouldn't he be exhausted to death? Do you want it to be like in the special training camp? They can challenge you, but you have to use cultivation resources as collateral? That's impossible. The school has clearly stated that auditing students have the qualifications to challenge you without limit. In other words, the same auditing student can challenge you without limit tomorrow, and you have to accept the challenge. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan playfully. She seemed to be impatient to see Qin Chuan being chased by a group of people. "This is the difficulty you mentioned. What's the benefit?" "The benefit is that you will become famous and will receive a lot of attention." Qin Chuan was speechless. In the coffee shop, Ningya casually browsed through the school's intranet forum. The corner of her mouth rose, and she could not help but reveal a charming smile. "Little vixen, what did you see this time?" Su Yuluo, who was sitting opposite her, reached out her small white hand and lightly tapped on Ningya's optical computer projection. A similar image appeared in front of her. When she saw the content of the post, she could not help but be surprised. "Forming a group to beat up number 001 greedy and lecherous Qin Xiaochuan. Reply and sign up." Su Yuluo looked at Ningya in astonishment. "You must have done this, right?" "Yes." Ningya nodded with a smile and said, "I said that I would make a study plan for the hell level difficulty for him. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow, you'll either get beaten up or beat up others. There is no third choice. Only when there is no way out can it be called hell level difficulty. Qin Chuan is really unlucky to be chosen by you." Su Yuluo looked at the number of people who signed up under the post with pity and sighed. There are a total of 140 auditing students. 60 of them have already signed up to form a group to beat up Qin Chuan tomorrow. You have to prepare a healing pod for Qin Chuan in advance. Auditing students might not be as strong as regular students in terms of individual strength, but as the saying goes, enough ants can kill an elephant. No matter how strong Qin Chuan was, he was only one person. Facing the siege of dozens of auditing students, it would be difficult for him to escape, let alone win. That's not necessarily true. Ningya chuckled. As someone who can walk out of the cursed land alive, he must have been besieged by the mountain ghosts. Those auditing students might not be able to cause any disturbance to him. Then what if those regular students also want to interfere? Su Yuluo pouted and said, "As far as I know, the school has always had a student number challenge rule. As long as you can defeat a student at the top, you can get a student number. I remember it was like this. As long as the older generation doesn't interfere, even if the seniors don't like him and want to beat him up, I don't have any objections." Ningya smiled like a flower. If Qin Chuan couldn't even withstand this test, he didn't deserve to be her student. As more and more new students connected to the school's intranet, more and more people found out that Qin Chuan was the new student number 001. That post about ganging up to beat up Qin Chuan also received more replies. Almost every auditing student was dreaming of becoming an official student, and the best dream was naturally to become an official student and get the student number 001 at the same time. Very naturally, Qin became the target of public criticism. Bluepool sat on the soft sofa and looked at the discussions about Qin on the school's intranet. A hint of indignation and fury couldn't help but surface in his eyes. As an official student among the new students, what right did Qin have to become the new student number 001? What right did everyone have to pay attention to Qin with the goal of defeating Qin, while he had to be ignored by everyone? Number 007. Looking at the student number displayed on the Black Moon badge, Bluepool's face flushed red, feeling extremely humiliated. What right did he have to be ranked as number 007? He couldn't take this lying down. Qin, I'll let you know who the true number 001 among the new students is. Chapter 133. According to the rules, the new students had to gather at the welcoming square at 8 a.m. on the day they officially entered the school. Qin and Lu Zi arrived at the welcoming square before 7:30 a.m. At this time, there were already many new students in the welcoming square. There were even some older students mixed in. "Boss, you're finally here." An extremely excited roar sounded in Qin's ears. Looking at Chun Chongqing, who rushed over with an excited expression, Qin was also very excited. There was no other way. Who asked him and Chun Chongqing to be the most famous among the new students? His greedy and lecherous reputation was deliberately spread by Ningya, so not many people took it seriously. However, Chun Chongqing was different. He had very arrogantly flirted with the gold core stage tutor, Su Yuluo, in front of all the new students. That kind of heroism and courage was not something that just anyone could have. Therefore, Chun Chongqing gained a reputation of being extremely daring, which was somewhat similar to Qin's greedy and lecherous reputation. Greedy and lecherous Qin Xiaochuan, extremely daring Chun Chongqing. The two of you are quite compatible standing together. Lu Zi looked at Qin and Chun Chongqing with a smile and teased, "Why don't the two of you form a group and directly debut on the spot? Let's call it being extremely lecherous." Looking at Lu Zi, who was trembling with laughter, Chun Chongqing had a helpless expression and said, "If I had known that little lowly would be a gold core stage tutor, even if you lent me 100 guts, I wouldn't have dared to flirt with her. My guts are very small. As for you, boss, I understand that you are greedy for money, but when have you been lecherous?" Speaking of this, Chun Chongqing suddenly smiled and said to Lu Zi, "Will you give boss the chance to be lecherous to other girls?" Lu Zi's face slightly reddened when she heard this. She lightly snorted and said, "What does it have to do with me who he is lecherous to? Let's not talk about these useless things." Qin sighed and said, "Haven't you noticed that we've been surrounded?" After receiving Qin's reminder, Lu Zi and Chun Chongqing finally noticed that they had unknowingly been surrounded by numerous auditing students. These auditing students were looking at them with gazes that harbored ill intentions. "Boss, I wasn't idle the whole day yesterday. I asked around and found out that the spiritual beads obtained from killing mountain ghosts are hard currency in our school. They can be used as academic credits. One spiritual bead is equivalent to 1 academic credit. After we paid the fine yesterday, we still have 200 spiritual beads left. I've already exchanged them all for academic credits and transfer them to your student number. You should have received them, right?" "Yes, but it's only 120 points. I've already transferred 30 points to each of you." Now that you're bringing this up, are you going to explain where the other 80 points went? Boss is indeed boss. You guessed it right away. In order to let boss display his prowess among the freshmen today, I exchanged the 80 points for good stuff. While speaking, Chun Chongqing handed Qin a box with a smile. Qin took it and opened it to take a look. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. He had to admit that it was a little unexpected and pleasantly surprised. At this moment, Baiyu also arrived at the welcoming square. She glanced at the crowd with an indifferent expression, then slowly walked to Qin's group. She didn't greet Qin's group, and just stood there silently. Qingchuan's group was already used to Baiju's behavior. They smiled at Baiyu and then continued with the previous topic. After 8 o'clock, the challenge will begin. Boss, I'm sure that you'll be targeted by more than half of the auditing students. Chen Changxing suggested to Qingchuan with shifty eyes. If you ask me, boss, why don't you take the initiative to attack? Just like in the battle of the Hidden Dragon Arena, you can defeat all of these auditing students. It can be considered as doing us a favor. Qingchuan rolled his eyes at Chen Changxing and said, You talk too much nonsense. Qingchuan was able to win in the battle of the Hidden Dragon Arena because he had the advantage of time and place. Moreover, his opponent was only an elite student of a high school. Now in this welcoming square, which auditing student wasn't a genius among geniuses. It was basically impossible to reproduce the exaggerated battle record of 1 versus 100. If Qingchuan really listened to Chen Changxing's words, he would be as arrogant as he was when he challenged everyone, and as tragic as he would be when he lost. Qingchuan had already made up his mind. When the challenge began after 8 o'clock, he would immediately leave the welcoming square as fast as he could, hide in a place where no one could find him, and wait until the challenge time was over before coming out. As for whether he would be looked down upon by others, Qingchuan didn't care. However, although Qingchuan's idea was good, the reality was incomparably cruel. Less than 5 minutes before 8 o'clock, Suyua's small figure slowly appeared in the sky above the welcoming square, attracting everyone's attention. Hello, everyone. I'm the chief examiner of today's test. You can call me Teacher Su. Su Yuluo looked at everyone with a smile and said, I came here today to bring you 2 great benefits. While speaking, Suyua's cute eyes looked at Qingchuan in the middle of the crowd, which made Qingchuan suddenly have an ominous premonition. Your teacher Ning asked me to pass on a message to everyone. If anyone can defeat Freshman 001, then they will have the qualifications to become Teacher Ning's unofficial disciple and receive Teacher Ning's personal training. Let me tell you a secret. Teacher Ning is the youngest level 3 Talisman Array Master in our Black Moon Combat Academy. At the same time, she is also a powerful cultivator in the late Gold Core stage. At the same time, any student who can leave a scar on Freshman 001's body during the challenge can go to the logistics department to receive a special nutrient solution and a Tian Luo fruit after the test is over. This is the handiwork of Teacher Lu from the logistics department. As Su Yolua's voice fell, all the new students in the welcoming square became restless. As long as they defeated Freshman 001, they could become the unofficial disciple of Ningya, a level 3 Talisman Array Master who was in the late Gold Core stage. Furthermore, they could go to the logistics department to receive cultivation resources as a reward. This was simply too awesome. For a moment, everyone's fiery eyes couldn't help but focus on Qingchuan. At this moment, Qingchuan was no longer a person in everyone's eyes, but a dazzling, human-shaped, moving treasure trove. Isn't this too reckless? Chen Changxing was dumbfounded. Qingchuan was already the target of public criticism, and now Ningya was adding fuel to the fire. She was trying to push Qingchuan to his death. Luzi was also dumbfounded. As Qingchuan's teacher, Ningya wanted to push Qingchuan down. She could understand that, but why was her grandfather, a teacher in the logistics department, adding insult to injury? Chapter 134. Among the auditing students present, there was no lack of experts at the 3rd or 4th level of the Qi refinement stage. Qingchuan was only at the 2nd level of the Qi refinement stage. He might not even have the upper hand in a one-on-one fight, let alone being ganged up on. Therefore, Qingchuan's current situation was very bad. Xiaochuan, I'm sorry. I didn't know my grandfather would actually mess around with Teacher Ning. Luzi looked at Qingchuan with a guilty gaze. She could imagine that after the test began, these auditing students would definitely do their best to leave scars on Qingchuan's body. When the time came, Qingchuan would probably be beaten into a pig's head. The corners of Qingchuan's lips twitched fiercely. Earlier, he was still wondering why this teacher from the logistics department wanted to mess with him. Now, he finally understood. So was Lu Zi's grandfather, who was stirring up trouble. What happened to your grandfather being very amiable, refined, and easygoing? We haven't even met, and he's already treating me like this. What will happen when we meet? Qin Chuan, let me protect you. Bai Yu, who had been silent all this while, suddenly walked to Qin Chuan's side and looked at Qin Chuan with a serious gaze. Bai Yu was different from Qin Chuan. Her strength was recognized by many of the new students. No one would forget how she made Blue Pool retreat with just one sentence 2 days ago, causing him to be angry but not dare to speak up. If Qin Chuan's number 001 was said to be overrated, then Bai Yu's number 002 could be said to be recognized by most people. There's no need for protection. Qin Chuan chuckled. I don't care about these people. Regardless of whether he won or lost, at least he couldn't lose face now. Dong! Following the sound of a bell, the admission test officially began. At this moment, everyone's gazes were on Qin Chuan, who was in the middle of the crowd, but no one acted rashly. After a short moment of silence, a figure slowly walked out from the crowd. She was wearing a long black dress. Her appearance was beautiful and her temperament was elegant. It could be said that she had the demeanor of a lady from a respectable family. Qin Chuan, I challenge you as number 003 of the new students. Hearing the words of the girl in the black dress, everyone's faces immediately revealed expressions of watching a show. Someone was willing to test Qin Chuan's true level for them. At the same time, they could exhaust Qin Chuan's spiritual power and physical strength. Qin Chuan looked at the proud young lady in a black dress standing in front of him and asked in confusion, You are? Seeing that Qin Chuan didn't recognize the girl in the black dress, Chen Changxing hurriedly whispered in Qin Chuan's ear, She's called Long Xiao. She's the daughter of the Long family, a family of talisman masters. She's only 16 years old and already has the strength of the 4th level of the refinement stage. It's said that she activated her innate talisman when she was in the body tempering stage. It's a variation of the black flame attribute, and its power is extremely great. Hearing Chen Changxing's introduction of Long Xiao, Qin Chuan couldn't help but feel a headache. This meant that he had to fight the boss from the beginning. Student number challenges were allowed to be rejected, but once Qin Chuan rejected, he would lose his student number 001. Although Qin Chuan didn't care about the ranking of his student number, Ningyi had clearly reminded him that if he wanted to keep the secret of the Cursed Land, then he had to do his best to display himself and let the school see his value. I accept your challenge, Yi Futian said. Qin Chuan sighed and said, But you're at the 4th level of the refinement stage, and I'm at the 2nd level of the refinement stage. You challenging me is a little bullying. How about I add a condition? You want me to limit my strength? Sure. Long Xiao calmly agreed. To her, this wasn't a difficult matter. No, you're mistaken. It's your business how much strength you want to use in battle. I don't care. Qin Chuan shook his head and said, My condition is, how about we add some stakes? I think it's good that the loser gives the winner a mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone. What do you think? Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone was stunned. In the face of such a serious challenge, Qin Chuan actually wanted to add stakes. Moreover, it was a mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone that was extremely compatible with his innate talisman attribute. He clearly didn't put Long Xiao in his eyes and thought that he would win without a doubt. You're very confident. Since childhood, this was the first time Long Xiao was looked down upon like this. It's not that I'm confident, but that you... Qin Chuan helplessly spread out his hands. Your strength is really average. Wow. As soon as Qin Chuan finished speaking, the entire crowd went into an uproar. This was too arrogant. How dare he be so arrogant and say that Long Xiao's strength was average? Qin Chuan saw everyone's reaction. He coughed lightly and said calmly, I'm not targeting anyone. I just think that everyone here is trash. Since he wanted to show off and be high profile, as long as he didn't die, he would be as high profile as possible. Su Yuluo, who was in the air, was stunned. She didn't expect Qin Chuan to say such a thing. Was this kid driven crazy by Ningyi? Lu Zi and Chen Changxing stared at Qin Chuan, dumbfounded. Did this guy take the wrong medicine? He actually used the hologram cannon. Even Bai Yu couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She looked at Qin Chuan as if she was looking at a person who had lost all hope in life and was begging for death. If he didn't want to die, why did he do this? Kill him, Long Xiao. Kill him for me. Long Xiao, are you going to do it or not? If you don't, we're going to do it. I've lived for 18 years, and this is the first time I've seen such an arrogant person. If I don't kill him, I'll change my surname to Qin. Qin Chuan's words completely enraged everyone present. Under the agitation of the crowd, a mouthful of saliva from each person would probably drown Qin Chuan. Just as everyone was shouting to teach Qin Chuan a lesson, a sudden clap of thunder fell from the square. Noisy. Following Qin Chuan's angry roar, the ground was filled with thunder. With Qin Chuan as the center, the azure lightning frantically wreaked havoc in all directions. The violent energy surged like an avalanche, forcing everyone to retreat and clearing the square in an instant. Everyone surrounded the square and stared at Qin Chuan, who was standing in the center of the lightning, in horror. They felt a faint numbness in their bodies and were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Boom! At the same time, a pitch-black flame suddenly appeared in the square. Then, the flame began to expand wildly. In just a few breaths' time, it had spread to half the square. It actually formed a confrontation with the lightning force field created by Qin Chuan. Within the black flame, Long Xiao looked as if he was wearing a flaming armor. He stared coldly at Qin Chuan and said in a deep voice, "My family's secret technique, the Divine Flame Technique. Please enlighten me." The Divine Flame Technique was the Long family's secret technique. Only the most outstanding direct descendants of each generation of the Long family were qualified to cultivate it. It was said that if one cultivated it to a high level, they could burn the sky and boil the sea. There was nothing they couldn't burn. Chapter 135. Remember to prepare a mid-tier Thunder Spirit Stone. Qin Chuan growled as he waved his arms. Under his control, the violent power of thunder transformed into two thunder snakes that roared as they charged into the sea of fire. Within the sea of fire, an angry roar shook the heavens as a fire dragon soared into the sky. As it rolled, it swallowed the invading thunder snake into its stomach and refined it in the blink of an eye. Seeing this scene, everyone was amazed. It was rumored that the Long family's Divine Flame Technique could burn anything. Now, it seemed that the rumors were true. However, everyone could see that the two thunder snakes were just Qin Chuan's probing attack. It didn't mean that Qin Chuan couldn't do anything to Long Xiao. The final result was still unknown. After the fire dragon swallowed the thunder snake, Long Xiao took out a pitch-black talisman pen and began to inscribe a talisman array in the air without using an array disc. At the same time, Qin Chuan also began to inscribe a talisman array. However, what made everyone's scalps go numb was that Qin Chuan didn't use a talisman pen to inscribe a talisman array. Instead, he used his spiritual energy to inscribe the array in the air. Using spiritual energy as a talisman pen to create an array in the air. When they realized this, everyone couldn't help but gasp, and they were extremely shocked in their hearts. Even the main examiner, Su Yuluo, was shocked by Qin Chuan's move. "Oh my god, this kid is too terrifying." Su Yuluo's mouth was wide open as she exclaimed, "No wonder that seductress Ning has suddenly wanted to take him in as a disciple. His talent is too exaggerated." At this moment, Su Yuluo could already imagine that once the results of this battle spread out, it would shake the entire academy. After so many years, their Black Moon Combat Academy had finally produced a talisman array genius who could create an array in the air. Long Xiao, who had been paying attention to Qin Chuan's every move, naturally noticed the strange phenomenon on Qin Chuan's side. When she realized that Qin Chuan didn't use a talisman pen, but instead used his powerful spiritual energy to create an array in the air, she couldn't help but fall into a trance for a moment. The realm that she had always dreamed of had actually appeared in front of her in such a way. With her mind in a mess, Long Zhao's incomplete talisman array suddenly showed signs of instability. When Long Xiao regained her senses and wanted to focus on inscribing the array, she realized that her mind was in a complete mess and she couldn't concentrate. At this moment, Qin Xuan had already finished inscribing the array. Lightning Talisman Array complete. Crackle. Under the control of Qin Xuan's mind, the violent power of thunder suddenly turned into a lifelike azure thunder dragon, occupying the square and looking down at everyone. Lightning shot out from its eyes, and in the blink of an eye, it pierced through the sea of fire and landed in front of Long Xiao. If this attack Long Xiao's long longs I've lost. Long Xiao looked at the deep hole in the ground and felt the violent power of the lightning. She put down the talisman pen in her hand and dispersed the sea of fire. She looked at Qin Xuan in the distance with a complicated expression and felt very sad. Ever since she had advanced to the Qi refinement stage, she had battled with countless geniuses, but this was the first time she had lost. Moreover, she had lost so cleanly. The spectators also didn't expect that Qin Xuan could defeat Long Xiao, who was at the 4th level of the Qi refinement stage, with his strength at the 2nd level of the Qi refinement stage. Long Xiao admitted defeat, but Qin Xuan didn't disperse the lightning dragon. He controlled it to fly above the crowd, and the violent power of the lightning wreaked havoc, causing everyone to retreat in shock. Who else? In the face of Qin Xuan's question, there was no other sound in the square other than the roar of thunder. Blue Pool's anger and the actions of the many auditing students were like a joke in the face of Qin Xuan's overwhelming strength. Freshman number 001 Qin Xuan had single-handedly suppressed the entire field. None of the freshmen could fight him. The battle had just ended, but this news spread throughout the entire Black Moon Combat Academy, as if it had grown wings. The video of Qin Xuan and Long Xiao's battle was uploaded to the school's intranet. At the same time, Qin Xuan's outstanding talent in using his spiritual energy as a talisman pen and creating a formation in the air caused everyone to exclaim in surprise and discuss it enthusiastically. Xiaoya, how many years have we known each other? Su Yuluo asked sweetly as she sat in front of Ningya. Her clear eyes looked at Ningya, who was reading the post on the school's forum with great interest. Ningya didn't even raise her head. If you have something to say, say it. We've known each other for more than 40 years. You should understand me. In all these years, I haven't accepted a single student. Su Yuluo said to Ningya in a fawning tone. Now that I've taken a liking to a student, it's a pity that he already has a teacher. What do you think I should do? This time, Ningya finally raised her eyes to look at Su Yuluo and said calmly, if you dare to have any ideas about Qin Xuan, I'll break your legs. Xiaoya, just take it that I'm begging you. Su Yuluo said coquettishly to Ningya, I really like Qin Xuan as a student. Just fulfill my wish. Don't give me that. Ningya rolled her eyes at Su Yuluo. Qin Xuan is my student. No one can take him away from me. To be honest, Ningya hadn't expected that Qin Xuan would give her such a huge surprise today. She knew that Su Yuluo was just the beginning. In the future, more people would come knocking on her door, wanting to accept Qin Xuan as a disciple. With Qin Xuan's astonishing talent, perhaps even the old dean, who hadn't paid attention to worldly affairs for a long time, would be alarmed. The test ended with a strong start and a weak finish. However, no one felt regretful. After all, they had witnessed the beginning of a legend with their own eyes. If I had been the one who went to Qingzhou Prefecture back then, perhaps Qin Xuan would be my student now. Su Yuluo couldn't help but sigh when she saw that Ningya was stubborn. Who would have thought that a real dragon would emerge from the hidden dragon arena battle? What pity. I also think it's a pity. Why didn't our Lan family discover that Qin Xuan was a genius earlier? Just then, an elegant middle-aged man in a tuxedo slowly walked into the cafe. He stood in front of Su Yuluo and Ningya with a smile. He smiled at Ningya and said, Ningya, our Lan family is very interested in Qin Xuan. So, Ningya looked coldly at the middle-aged man in front of her. Lan Qingshan, what does your Lan family want to do? I have a niece who is very beautiful. Her cultivation talent and character are both excellent. Perhaps she can have a happy marriage with a genius like Qin Chuan. As far as I know, Qin Chuan is an orphan. As his teacher, you should be able to make decisions for him. So you want a marriage alliance. I thought your Lan family wanted to poach him. Ningya smiled faintly. I only care about Qin Chuan's cultivation. I don't care about his love life. If you have the ability to make him take a fancy to your niece and agree to be the son-in-law of your Lan family, I naturally have no objections. However, if you dare to force him to do anything that is detrimental to him, then I don't care how much power your Lan family has in Kanglan Ancient City or how many seats you have in the school council. If I want to kill someone from your Lan family, no one can stop me. Ningya looked coldly at Lan Qingshan and said coldly, remember, I, Ningya, always keep my word. Chapter 136. At night, on the way back to the temporary dormitory, Qin Chuan met Ningya, who was waiting for him under the street lamp. Looking at Ningya, who was wearing a blue and white cheongsam, standing under the dim yellow street lamp, Qin Chuan smiled and walked up to her. He acted extremely respectfully and said to Ningya, Teacher, good evening. Were you waiting for me? Ningya looked deeply at Qin Chuan, who was standing in front of her. She was silent for a while before saying, Your performance today surprised me. To be honest, it stunned me. The most ordinary talisman formation master needed to use a talisman brush and a formation disc to complete the inscription of a talisman formation array. Talisman formation masters who had extremely precise control of their own strength could directly use a talisman brush to inscribe a talisman formation array in the air without using a formation disc. Talisman formation masters who had extremely precise control of their own strength and powerful spiritual energy could directly use their spiritual energy as a talisman brush to inscribe a talisman formation array in the air. This third situation would rarely happen to a qi condensation cultivator, and anyone who could do this while still in the qi condensation stage was a super genius. 1 in a million. When she first came into contact with Qin Chuan, Ningya could see that Qin Chuan had a very strong talent in talisman formation Dao. However, she never thought that Qin Chuan's talent in talisman formation Dao would be strong to such an extent. Thank you for your praise, teacher. Originally, I didn't want to reveal this, but you told me to show off as much as possible. I had no choice but to do as you said. Qin Chuan grinned. The reason why he could be so high profile was because Chun Chongqing used 80 academic credits to exchange for 2 mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stones. Otherwise, he would really have no way to be high profile. With your talent, you can already inscribe a talisman formation array in the air without the help of a talisman brush and a formation disc when you're only in the second level of Qi refinement stage. Perhaps when you're in the Golden Core stage, or even the Foundation Establishment stage, you'll be able to instantly inscribe a talisman formation array with just a thought. Ningya glanced deeply at Qin Chuan and said, Even I sometimes need the help of a talisman brush when I'm inscribing some complicated talisman formations. Your future accomplishments in the Tao of talisman formations will far surpass mine. At this point, Ningya paused for a moment and looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze. But you have to understand that the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Your performance today has attracted the attention of many big shots, but not all of them will be kind to you. So, someone is here today? Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly. He felt that it was a little strange that Ningya was waiting for him here tonight. It seemed that tonight might not be very peaceful. The Lan family came to me in the afternoon, hoping that you can become their son-in-law. Ningya asked faintly, Do you have any thoughts about this? No. Qin Chuan shook his head without hesitation. What a joke. He didn't even know whether the Lan family's daughter was tall, short, fat, or thin. How could he have any thoughts about this? Even if the Lan family's daughter was as beautiful as a fairy, he would still need to have feelings for her before he could talk about anything else. Ningya wasn't surprised to get a definite answer from Qin Chuan. Instead, she thought that it was natural. If Qin Chuan really wanted to be involved with some aristocratic family, he wouldn't have rejected the Yu family's good intentions back then. She knew a little about what happened to Qin Chuan outside. At this time, the Lan family should have already sent someone to wait for you at the door of your temporary dormitory. Since you don't want to be involved with the Lan family, then come to my place tonight. When the dormitory is officially assigned tomorrow, it won't be so easy for the Lan family to contact you again. With that, Ningya turned and prepared to leave. Looking at Ningya's enchanting back, Qin Chuan was a little stunned. Go to your house. Why? You don't want to? Ningya didn't even turn her head. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. My cultivation room is extremely luxurious. It can be ranked in the top 3 of the Azure Ancient City. Teacher, wait for me. Qin Chuan immediately followed her. Luxurious cultivation rooms were his favorite. In the Lan family's residence, Lan Qingshan stood on the balcony, looking at the brightly lit Black Moon Combat Academy in the distance with an expressionless face. Ningya, you said that you wouldn't interfere in this matter. Now, you've broken your promise. If he couldn't get a genius, then he could only destroy him. The next morning, Qin Chuan finally stopped cultivating when there was still an hour before his morning class. Although Ningya often tricked him in the past, she didn't lie to him about the cultivation room. Ningya's cultivation room was indeed very luxurious. It almost fulfilled all of Qin Chuan's requirements. It even had functions that Qin Chuan couldn't think of. Looking at Qin Chuan, who was sweating profusely, Ningya pursed her lips and said to Qin Chuan, "Originally, I wanted to choose a cultivation technique from the school's library to teach you. However, after observing your cultivation last night, I realized that the cultivation technique you're currently cultivating is more suitable for you." Ningya could see that Qin Chuan's cultivation technique was an orthodox lightning-based cultivation technique. It was very compatible with Qin Chuan's innate rune attribute. Furthermore, its grade shouldn't be low. Since that was the case, there was no need for her to help Qin Chuan choose a new cultivation technique. "This is for you." Ningya casually threw a chip to Qin Chuan and said to Qin Chuan, "There are 26 types of runes recorded in it. All of them are of the mystic level. There are 3 types of lightning-based runes. Within 2 months, you must master all of these runes. You can meditate on them in an instant." Qin Chuan reached out and caught the I chip. His face couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. For Qin Chuan, what he needed the most now was high-level runes. Ningya's I chip could be said to be a great help to him. "Thank you, teacher. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. If you can't master these 26 runes within 2 months, I'll dissuade you." Ningya looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "Let me give you a friendly reminder. 4 of these runes require you to be at least at the 8th level of the Qi refining stage to barely master them." Hearing Ningya's last sentence, Qin Chuan's expression couldn't help but change slightly. With his current cultivation, there was still a huge gap between him and the 8th level of the Qi refining stage. In 2 months, he had to both cultivate and meditate on runes. The difficulty was not ordinary. "All right, pack up and prepare to report. Today is the first day of class, so don't be late. Don't embarrass me." After saying this, Ningya turned and left. Qin Chuan packed up his things and changed into a brand new black uniform. He immediately dashed towards the first year's teaching block. Although the Black Moon Combat Academy only recruited 9 official first-year students and 140 auditing students this year, the first year's teaching block occupied an extremely large area. It could accommodate over 1,000 people at the same time. Because there weren't many students, they weren't divided into classes. Everyone was taught in the same classroom. When Qin Chuan arrived at the ring-shaped classroom, there were already many people there. The originally noisy classroom suddenly quieted down after Qin Chuan appeared. Chapter 137. After personally witnessing Qin Chuan's overbearingness and strength, everyone had now acknowledged Qin Chuan's strength and status as the number 001 freshman. Therefore, when Qin Chuan appeared in the classroom, everyone subconsciously shut their mouths and stopped talking. One after another, they turned their gazes towards Qin Chuan. Facing everyone's complicated and varied gazes, Qin Chuan appeared quite calm. He went straight to Lu Zi, who was sitting in the front row, sat down beside Lu Zi, and asked, "Why are you sitting here?" As the last-place student in high school, Qin Chuan had always sat in the last row of the classroom. Now that he was sitting in the first row, he really wasn't used to it. According to the rules, us official students must sit in the front row of the classroom. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan's tight-fitting school uniform, smiled slightly, and said, "You look quite handsome wearing this. You're also very beautiful." After the two people mutually praised each other, they finally shifted the topic to today's serious matter. Today, we're going to elect the class monitor, and at the same time, we'll be divided into groups. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and said, "I think, after yesterday's matter, there shouldn't be anyone competing with you for the class monitor position. However, the grouping is generally done in pairs. What do you think?" Looking at Lu Zi's slightly unnatural expression, Qin Chuan pretended to ponder. Grouping, if it's in pairs, I have to think about who among the freshmen is more suitable. However, do you have any good candidates to recommend to me? Lu Zi slightly narrowed her eyes, and her body gradually emitted a dangerous aura. Seeing that Lu Zi was about to go berserk, Qin Chuan quickly took out his Black Moon badge and handed it to Lu Zi and said, "Come, let's bind. I didn't force you to do this." When Lu Zi saw Qin Chuan take the initiative to take out his badge, she couldn't help but smile. She reached out and took Qin Chuan's badge, binding it with Qin Chuan's badge. This way, the two of them were officially party members. They could use their badges to determine each other's location and, at the same time, communicate more quickly and conveniently. "Boss, don't." Suddenly, a wail sounded at the door of the classroom. Chen Changxing rushed in. When he saw that Qin Chuan and Lu Zi's badges had been successfully bound, he could not help but say with a distressed expression, "I'm just a step too late. What a pity. Even if you came early, it's none of your business." Lu Zi rolled her eyes at Chen Changxing. When she became stronger in the future, she would definitely teach this fellow a lesson. He really didn't have any eyesight at all. "It's okay, you can bind with Baiyu." Qin Chuan smiled slightly, indicating that Chen Changxing had a better choice. Who knew that when Chen Changxing heard Qin Chuan's words, the expression on his face became even more distressed. He helplessly said to Qin Chuan, "I also know that I can't compete with Lu Zi, so I set my sights on Baiyu. But when I went to find Baiyu this morning, that woman Long Xiao had already found Baiyu one step ahead of me and bound with her." Qin Chuan and Lu Zi were a little surprised when they heard this. They were actually intercepted halfway. While the three of them were talking, Baiyu and Long Xiao walked into the classroom together. Baiyu nodded lightly at Qin Chuan and the other two as a greeting, while Long Xiao walked straight to Qin Chuan. Ever since Qin Chuan appeared, he had been the focus of everyone's attention. At this time, when Long Xiao walked in front of Qin Chuan, it immediately aroused everyone's curiosity. Could it be that Long Xiao wanted to challenge Qin Chuan again? "This is your mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone." Long Xiao placed a mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone in front of Qin Chuan and said, "In the future, every time I challenge you, I will prepare a mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone in advance." Originally, Qin Chuan was in a good mood when he saw Long Xiao keeping her promise and giving him a mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone. However, when he heard Long Xiao's last sentence, he couldn't help but ask with some astonishment, "You will continue to challenge me in the future?" "Of course, I have already set you as a target that I must defeat in university. Before I defeat you, I will challenge you at any time." Long Xiao looked at Qin Chuan with burning eyes. Within 3 years, she must defeat Qin Chuan and prove that she was the strongest talisman array genius. After leaving these words, Long Xiao turned and walked towards Baiyu. Qin Chuan sighed helplessly. It was really unfortunate to be targeted by a battle maniac like Long Xiao. However, on the bright side, at least he could get a mid-grade Thunder Spirit Stone every time. It was not bad. Duh. The sound of high heels hitting the ground came from the door. A beautiful figure wearing a white dress walked into the classroom and went straight to the center of the podium. Seeing this scene, everyone understood that their teacher had arrived. "Hello, students. I am your class teacher. My name is Lan Weiwei. You can call me Teacher Lan. Lan Weiwei? Hearing this name, Qin couldn't help but gently raise his eyebrows. This teacher Lan should have some kind of relationship with the Lan family, right? As for the student's information, I've already read it carefully before, so I have a general understanding of everyone. Now, I hope to choose a class monitor from among the students to be responsible for the various affairs of the class. Lan Weiwei's gaze swept over the 9 official students and finally fell on Qin. She pursed her lips and said, "The class monitor not only needs to have strong strength, but also needs to have a sense of responsibility. Student Qin, do you think you are qualified for the position of class monitor?" Being directly called by Lan Weiwei, Qin stood up and nodded. "I can. Very good. Then I will temporarily appoint you as class monitor. Do the other students have any different opinions?" Lan Weiwei looked at the others. When she saw that they didn't have any objections to Qin becoming class monitor, she understood. It seemed that Qin's great display of power yesterday had left a deep impression in everyone's hearts. So much so that no one dared to compete with Qin for the position. The second matter is the issue of dormitory allocation. According to the school's regulations, official students can choose a single dormitory, or they can choose a multi-person dormitory. Auditing students have a unified 4-person dormitory. Official students' dormitories are equipped with small cultivation rooms, while auditing students need to go to the school's public cultivation rooms to practice. Lan Weiwei briefly explained the allocation of dormitories, then turned to the 9 official students. According to tradition, official students generally choose a single dormitory. Do you have any objections? Lan Weiwei had only casually asked. After all, the official students were all super geniuses, and they all had their own little secrets. Usually, they prefer to cultivate alone, so a single dormitory should be a choice that official students would make. However, at this time, someone raised their hand and expressed a different opinion. This person was Qin, who had just become class monitor. Chapter 138. Seeing Qin raise his hand, Lan Weiwei was a little surprised, but she didn't think much about it. She smiled at Qin and asked, "Classmate Qin, do you have any opinions about the dormitory allocation?" "Teacher, I just have a small suggestion." Qin looked at Lan Weiwei with subtle eyes and said, "I want to live in the same dormitory with my team members. This will help cultivate the tacit understanding between us. I hope teacher can agree." Hearing Qin's proposal, Lan Weiwei smiled faintly and said, "This is a very normal proposal. In the past, there were many official students who lived together in order to cultivate the tacit understanding of the team. I can agree with you, but who is your teammate?" Originally, Lan Weiwei thought that Qin's teammate would be Chen Changxing, but when Lu Zi slowly stood up, she couldn't help but be stunned. Lu Zi's head was full of question marks. Qin proposed a matter of the team members living together without discussing it with her. He proposed it so straightforwardly, not giving her any time or opportunity to think about it. When everyone saw Lu Zi stand up, they looked at Qin with strange eyes. Team members living together? This was clearly a man and a woman living together. Classmate Lu Zi and you were bound to a team? Lan Weiwei was a little astonished. Was he in love? Yes. Qin coughed lightly and said, "I think the school doesn't stipulate that male and female students can't be bound to a team, right?" "No." Lan Weiwei looked at Qin deeply, and finally turned her gaze to Lu Zi and asked, "Classmate Lu Zi, are you willing to live with classmate Qin?" At this time, the classroom was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. Everyone focused their eyes on Lu Zi, waiting for Lu Zi's answer. Lu Zi looked at Qin with some entanglement, and then whispered to Lan Weiwei, "I have no opinion." Then that's it. Lan Weiwei pursed her lips and said to everyone, "Now, let's start the class." As the head teacher, Lan Weiwei mainly talked about the structure and connection of runes, which was a compulsory course. Everyone listened very seriously. The neatness and strictness of the rune structure will directly affect the stability and power of the runes. Only when the neatness and strictness of the runes are connected can a perfect array system. Take the basic water's spirit rune as an example. Spirit runes' rune. What Lan Weiwei said on the podium, LVZ didn't listen at all. At this time, her mind was full of thoughts about the dormitory allocation. Why did Qin Chuan propose to live with her? Don't be distracted. You'll be in trouble if the teacher asks you to answer the question. Qin Chuan saw Lu Zi's dazed appearance and whispered to Lu Zi, "If you have any questions, wait until after class." Lu Zi heard this and looked deeply at Qin Chuan. She whispered, "Qin Chuan, what do you mean?" After class, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi immediately got up and left the classroom. When everyone saw Qin Chuan and Lu Zi leave, they all whispered. Only a freshman and a man and a woman can live together. It really made people envious and drool. Ah? Qin Chuan took Lu Zi to a flower bed outside the teaching building. He looked back at Lu Zi behind him and smiled. There are two reasons why I propose to live together. First, the Lan family found my teacher yesterday, hoping to let me become the son-in-law of the Lan family. Today, in the classroom, the head teacher has been quietly looking at me, so I suspect, Lu Zi couldn't help but be stunned. She really didn't know that the Lan family wanted to recruit Qin Chuan as a son-in-law. At this time, when she heard Qin Chuan mention it, she suddenly felt that the way Lan Weiwei looked at Qin Chuan seemed to be a bit strange. Although Lan Weiwei looks very young and beautiful, after all, I don't have any emotional foundation with her. I don't want to have anything to do with the Lan family, so I can only avoid her. Qin Chuan helplessly spread out his hands and said, "At that time, I deliberately proposed to live with you to test this Lan Weiwei. Her performance made me more suspicious that my guess was correct." "So, you're using me as a shield?" Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression. She didn't know why, but after hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. "Of course not. I said there were two reasons." Qin Chuan grinned and said to Lu Zi, "Living with me, there are benefits." Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan suspiciously and asked, "What benefits?" "When we return to the dormitory, you will know. Compared to high school, college life could be said to be very free. Whether or not to study all depended on one's self-awareness. As long as one could pass the semi-annual test, even if one slept every day for half a year, no one would care about you. Once you fail the test, what awaited you is expulsion." Therefore, after Lan Weiwei's class ended, many freshmen didn't relax. Those who had to cultivated, and those who had to go to elective courses, everyone showed incomparable seriousness and diligence. At this time, Qin Chuan and Lu Zi had already brought things to their dormitory. However, it was more like a villa than a dormitory. Qin Chuan and Lu Zi's dormitory was divided into two floors. The first floor was the daily living area, and the second floor was the cultivation room. The environment was clean and tidy, and everything was available. If they needed anything, they only needed to contact the logistics department through the school's intranet. Naturally, someone would deliver the things they needed to the door in the shortest time possible. This was one of the privileges that only official students had. After entering the dormitory, Lu Zi casually chose a room as her bedroom. After tidying up her things, she said to Qin Chuan, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room, "Now can you tell me what the benefits are? Change into your training clothes and come with me." Qin Chuan and Lu Zi came to the cultivation room. First, they checked the equipment in the cultivation room. Although it was worse than Ningya's private cultivation room, it was almost the same as Zhou Meng's cultivation room. It was enough to meet the daily needs of Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. Qin Chuan went to the center of the cultivation room and sat down cross-legged. Without saying a word, he began to inscribe the talisman array. Seeing Qin Chuan's actions, Lu Zi was a little surprised, but she didn't ask much. She sat opposite Qin Chuan and watched Qin Chuan inscribe the talisman array. However, what surprised her was that the talisman array inscribed by Qin Chuan this time looked extremely complicated and took a long time. After a full 7 minutes, Qin Chuan finally finished inscribing the talisman array. At the same time, Lucy noticed that the spiritual fluctuations in the cultivation room seemed to have begun to become active. This is a spiritual talisman array. It can increase the spiritual activity around the talisman array by at least 30%. Qin looked at Lu Zi with a smile and asked, "What do you think of this benefit?" Chapter 139. It wasn't just the spirit absorption talisman array. Previously, he didn't have the conditions, but now that the school provided sufficient cultivation resources, Qin was prepared to put the spirit injection talisman array's inscription on the agenda. The spirit injection talisman array was different from the spirit absorption talisman array. The spirit injection talisman array extracted the spiritual energy contained in the spirit stones and directly injected it into the human body to aid in cultivation. It sounded no different from directly extracting the spiritual energy from the spirit injection talisman array. But in reality, the spiritual energy extracted from the spirit injection talisman array was refined, pure, and more stable. It was also more beneficial for absorption. It seemed like there was only one more process, but the changes within were as different as heaven and earth. Lu Zi had thought of many possibilities, but she never thought that Qin would actually master a talisman array that increased the activity of spiritual energy. Even if it was only 30%, it was already shocking enough. This is indeed a very good benefit. Lu Zi looked at Qin with some expectations and asked, "How long can you last? Will it affect your cultivation?" "It won't." Qin smiled slightly. As long as the talisman array is successfully inscribed, the spiritual energy consumed in the process of maintaining it will be very little. This way, not only can it speed up our cultivation speed, but it can also temper my spiritual energy. It's like killing two birds with one stone. As for how long it can last, I estimate that if it doesn't stop for a moment, it can last for at least 3 days. Don't talk anymore. I'm going to start cultivating. Lu Zi couldn't wait to start cultivating at this time. Chatting in this unique environment was simply wasting one's life. Cultivation knew no time. Unknowingly, 2 months had already passed. In these 2 months, many of the new students had already become familiar with each other and made many new friends. However, there were 2 people who were very elusive, causing many people to feel very curious about them. These 2 people were Qin and Lu Zi. From the beginning of school until now, 2 months had passed. Qin and Lu Zi had not appeared in the teaching building except for the first class. According to the rumors, Qin and Lu Zi had not taken a single step out of the dormitory since they moved into the dormitory. Who would believe that a man and a woman who lived together for 2 months was only cultivating? It's been 2 months. Don't tell me that Boss and Lu Zi aren't tired of each other at all. Chen Chongqing lay on the grass with a blade of grass in his mouth. He looked at Bai Yu and Long Xiao, who were sitting to the side, and asked, "Do you think the 2 of them are planning to create a human?" Bai Yu was not interested in Chen Chongqing's guess, but Long Xiao frowned. She had seen many geniuses delay their cultivation because of love, and in the end, they disappeared into the crowd. According to Qin and Lu Zi's current situation, this was not impossible. I've checked. Both of them attend classes through the school's intranet. They don't miss a single class. Bai Yu suddenly spoke, explaining for Qin and Lu Zi. Of course, they can't stick together all the time. It's normal that they have time to attend classes. Chen Chongqing sighed and said, "The greedy and lecherous Qin, Xiaochuan really isn't fake. If you're so curious, why don't you visit them directly?" Long Xiao glanced at Chen Chongqing and suggested that Chen Chongqing go and see the situation. "I've thought about it, but I'm afraid that I'll be a sinner if I say the wrong thing." Chen Chongqing shrugged helplessly and said, "Instead of annoying them, it's better to think about how to improve your strength and earn credits." In these 2 months of university life, many freshmen had realized the importance of strength and credits. Because the Azure Ancient City was almost isolated from the outside world, it was very difficult for the outside world to have any interaction with the Azure Ancient City. Even if some freshmen' families were rich, there was no way for them to directly send cultivation resources to the school. Therefore, if the freshmen wanted to obtain cultivation resources, they could only rely on the school. In addition to providing a certain amount of cultivation resources to the students every month, the school also provided the students with an opportunity to obtain more advanced cultivation resources, which was to use credits to exchange for cultivation resources. If you want to exchange for better cultivation resources from the school, you must first have credits. And if you want to earn credits, you must first have the strength of at least the 8th level of the chi refining stage. Only then can you accept commission tasks on the school's intranet. After completing the task, the school will naturally reward you with credits. Under normal circumstances, official students would cultivate to the 8th level of the chi refining stage within 3 to 4 months of entering the school and begin to accept the school's commission tasks. Now that 2 months had passed, Chen Changxing's strength had already risen from the 3rd level of the chi refining stage to the 6th level of the chi refining stage. There was still a large distance to the 8th level of the chi refining stage. It was estimated that it would take at least more than a month. His cultivation speed was naturally fast compared to the auditing students, but compared to the official students, it was a bit slower. At the very least, Long Xiao and Bai Yu were now at the 7th level of the chi refining stage. In less than half a month's time, they would be able to accept the school's commission tasks and begin earning credits. He was one step slower than the others, and in the future his cultivation would probably always be one step slower. Because of this, Chen Changxing was very eager to increase his strength. He wanted to catch up to Long Xiao and Bai Yu as soon as possible so that he wouldn't fall too far behind. Without credits, there's no way to obtain rare cultivation resources. There's also no way to obtain higher-level runes and glyphs. And when the next semester comes, the school will stop providing free cultivation resources. AI, it's really too hard. Chen Changxing sighed. These days were simply too hard to endure. Dong, dong, dong. A melodious bell rang, arousing the curiosity of Chen Changxing and the other two. Everything was fine, so why did the school bell suddenly ring? I remember Professor Lon once said in class that 2 months after the new students enter the school will publish a list. The new student's strength will be ranked from high to low, and then the reward will be given out in turn. Chen Changxing muttered in a low voice. He suddenly sat up, turned on his photon computer, and searched for the school's intranet. Sure enough, on the front page of the school's intranet, there was a ranking list. It was for the new students who had entered the school 2 months ago. Chen Changxing opened the ranking list and glanced at it. The 9 people at the top of the list were, unsurprisingly, their 9 official students. However, when he saw the names of the 1st and 2nd place, Chen Changxing could not help but widen his eyes. Holy shit, it's actually Boss and Lu Zi. How is this possible? Hearing Chen Changxing's exclamation, Bai Yu and Long Xiao couldn't help but look over. When they saw Qin Xuan and Lu Zi's names, they were stunned. They were at the 8th level of the chi refining stage. These 2 guys who had holed up in the dorm for 2 months and hadn't gone out had actually cultivated to the 8th level. Chapter 140. It's great to have a grandfather who's a teacher in the logistics department. Qin Xuan lay on the floor of the cultivation room. His eyes lazily looked at Lu Zi, who was cultivating under 5 times the gravity, and his heart was filled with emotion. In these 2 months, he and Lu Zi had never left the dormitory. Whether it was day or night, they were cultivating almost nonstop. During this period, the resources they needed for cultivation were all provided by the logistics department. Their share was a bit more than the other official students, and the extra share came from Lu Zi's grandfather. Now, Qin Xuan was able to coexist the spiritual absorption glyph array and the spiritual injection glyph array. Although this consumed a lot of his spiritual power, and he could only maintain it for about 10 hours at most, it still allowed Qin Xuan and Lu Zi's cultivation speed to increase by a lot. Cultivating for a day was almost equivalent to cultivating for 2 days for other people. If it wasn't for this, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi wouldn't have been able to advance from the second level of the Qi refining stage to the 8th level of the Qi refining stage within 2 months. After cultivating to the 8th level of the Qi refining stage, Qin Xuan and Lu Zi decided to temporarily slow down their cultivation speed. It wasn't because their bodies couldn't bear it, but because their cultivation speed was too fast, which caused their control of their own strength to decrease. In simple terms, although they were now at the 8th level of the Qi refining stage, their actual combat strength couldn't reach the standard of the 8th level of the Qi refining stage. Therefore, what they needed to do now was to improve their control of their own strength through actual combat, stabilize their current realm, and strengthen their foundation. For Qin Xuan, there was another important matter. The 2-month agreement between him and Ningya had arrived. He needed to find Ningya to complete the assessment. Otherwise, when Ningya personally came to find him, he was afraid that he would inevitably be beaten up. Qin Xuan quietly watched Lu Zi cultivate for a while. Then he got up and changed into clean clothes. He went straight to Ningya's residence. When Qin Xuan came to Ningya's place, Ningya was sitting in the garden drinking tea. Seeing Qin Xuan come over, she looked at Qin Xuan up and down playfully and suddenly asked, "Are you still a man?" Qin Xuan was stunned. How was he not a man? Living with such a beautiful girl for 2 months, yet you still haven't broken your yuanyang body. Is it because you're too tolerant, or is it because it's not convenient? Ningya teased. If you can't do it, then you'd better explain it to the girl as soon as possible, lest you delay her. Qin Xuan rolled his eyes speechlessly and said, "We don't even have enough time to cultivate. How can we have the time to think about other things? You're really simple." Ningya covered her mouth and smiled. "You came here today to let me test you, right?" Qin Xuan nodded and said, "I have completely mastered the 26 runes." Hearing Qin Xuan's answer, Ningya nodded gently and threw a chip to Qin Xuan. She said, "There are 3 rune arrays in it: the Thunderbolt rune array, the Flying Cloud rune array, and the Two-Heart rune array. The Thunderbolt rune array is a thunder rune array, which can be inscribed under the feet to increase movement speed. The Flying Cloud rune array is an illusion array, which can be used to trap enemies. The Two-Heart rune array allows you to communicate with your companions directly without speaking. Learning these 3 rune arrays may be helpful for your future missions." Qin Xuan was a little surprised and asked, "Don't you want to take the assessment?" "It's not necessary," Ningya said indifferently. "Since you're here, it proves that you have the confidence to pass the assessment. In that case, why should I waste my energy and time to test you? Moreover, cultivation is your own matter. If you don't want to work hard and want to slack off, I have no objections. It's fine as long as you don't regret it in the future." Qin Xuan was moved when he heard this. He looked deeply at Ningya and asked, "Can I teach these rune arrays to others?" Ningya glanced at Qin Xuan and said indifferently, "You're talking about Lu Zi, right? I know that her talent rune is of the illusion attribute. The Flying Cloud rune array is quite suitable for her. If you want to teach her, then teach her. You can't tell me that you haven't shown these 26 profound runes to Lu Zi in the past 2 months, right? As expected of teacher, I can't hide anything from you." Qin Xuan scratched his head awkwardly. Ningya was right. He had shown these 26 profound runes to Lu Zi. "Well, if there's nothing else, you can go back. But there's one thing I have to remind you. You've accepted the school's commission, so you must leave the school to carry out missions outside. Those who have been watching you may take action. Do you understand?" "I'll be careful." Qin Xuan pursed his lips, and the expression on his face became dignified. Although he didn't notice anyone targeting him during this period of time, since Ningya said so, it was definitely not without reason. "Well, this old woman has nothing else to say. Go back and accompany your little woman." Qin Xuan rolled his eyes speechlessly. "As a teacher, can't you be more serious?" After leaving Ningya's place, Qin Xuan was ready to return to the dormitory. Not long after leaving the door, he met a white-haired old man. Qin Xuan glanced at him and was ready to move aside. However, he didn't expect that when he moved aside, the old man suddenly turned around and bumped into him. "Ouch!" The old man cried out and sat on the ground. He covered his head and scolded Qin Chuan. "You stinking brat! Don't you look where you're going?" Qin Chuan looked at the old man sitting on the ground and scolding him. He said helplessly, "Old man, I've already moved aside. You didn't notice that you bumped into me." "What do you mean?" The old man was furious. "Are you saying that I'm framing you and slandering you?" "I didn't mean that." Qin Chuan had a headache. Why did he have to meet such an unreasonable person? "I don't care. You have to compensate me for mental damage and medical expenses." The old man snorted and said, "Otherwise, I'll go to your school and report you to your teachers. I'll let them give you a big demerit." "Okay, how much do you want?" Qin Chuan sighed helplessly. So be it if he had to pay some money. He would just treat it as spending money to avoid disaster. "I don't want much. Just 100 million. 100 million? Qin Chuan's eyes widened and he blurted out, 100 million? Why don't you go rob a bank?" "I'm asking you if you'll pay me or not. If you don't, I'll go to the school and report you." The old man insisted on 100 million as compensation. His attitude was very firm and very bad. "Then go ahead and report me." Qin Chuan rolled his eyes. As long as the school's teachers weren't fools, they could naturally see that he was being framed. However, the old man didn't care. He turned on the optical computer on his wrist and began to shake people. "Granddaughter, your grandpa was beaten up. Come take a look. If you're late, your grandpa will die." Chapter 141. Qin Chuan's last bit of patience was finally worn away when he saw the old man trying to shake him off. He glanced at the old man and said bluntly, "Old man, let me tell you, it's useless to play this game with me. If I want to leave, you can't stop me." With that, Qin Chuan prepared to turn around and leave. However, he did not expect that the moment he turned around, the old man who was sitting on the ground had already strangely appeared in front of him and blocked his path. "Brat, don't even think about leaving today." Qin Chuan looked at the old man who was clamoring to teach him a lesson and was a little stunned. He subconsciously turned around again, and as expected, the old man's figure appeared in front of him again. He had met an expert this time. After thinking about this, Qin Chuan subconsciously connected the old man blocking his path with the person Ning Ye had mentioned who wanted to harm him. He looked at the old man with vigilance and seriousness. "Which family are you from?" Qin Chuan looked at the old man coldly. The Lan family or the Li family? The only clans that Qin Chuan could think of that would be detrimental to him were the Lan and Li clans. However, the Li clan was far away in Xiang City, so they shouldn't be able to extend their reach here. Based on this inference, the only one left was the Lan clan. The Lan family was too shameless to frame him after failing to recruit him as a son-in-law. What Lan family or Li family? I'm just an old man who's injured. The old man rolled his eyes at Qin Chuan. Suddenly, he stepped forward and hugged Qin Chuan's thigh. He cried bitterly, "Young man, don't hit me anymore. This old man's body can't take it anymore. If you hit me again, I'll die." As the old man cried, he reached out and grabbed 2 handfuls of dust from the ground and casually rubbed it on his face and body. He really looked like a sorry figure. Looking at the old man who was trying his best to act, Qin Chuan felt helpless. Just as he was about to break free from the old man's grip, a familiar voice suddenly came from nearby. "Grandfather, Qin Chuan." Qin Chuan squatted by the roadside and looked at the angry old man sitting on the ground. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that the old man was sent by the Lan family to frame him. After all this time, the old man turned out to be Lu Zi's grandfather, the teacher from the logistics department, Lu Xiangyang. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" Lu Zi looked helplessly at her grandfather, who was sitting on the ground, and then looked at Qin Chuan, who was smiling bitterly. Originally, she really thought that her grandfather was being bullied. Now, it seemed that her grandfather was being petty and deliberately bullying Qin Chuan. What did I do? I was just walking when this brat knocked me to the ground. I wanted him to compensate me, but he refused. Am I wrong? This brat keeps calling me an old man. He doesn't know how to respect the old and love the young. He's obviously not a good person. Lu Xiangyang's face was unconvinced. He thought that he would take advantage of his granddaughter, but he didn't expect that his granddaughter would side with an outsider and help Qin Chuan, this brat. "Oh man, I was wrong. I sincerely apologize to you," Qin Chuan said helplessly to Lu Xiangyang. "This is a compensation of 100 million yuan. I really can't afford it." If he knew that this was Lu Zi's grandfather, Qin Chuan wouldn't have called him an old man out of anger. Now, this address became Lu Xiangyang's weakness to attack him. If you weren't being unreasonable, Qin Chuan wouldn't be so impatient with you. Lu Zi also had a headache at this time. "Grandpa, the ground is cold. Can you get up first? I'm a gold core stage cultivator. I'm not afraid of the cold." Lu Xiangyang snorted and glared at Qin Chuan angrily. "Brat, I won't get up without 100 million yuan today." "Grandpa, Qin Chuan doesn't have that much money. Why do you have to ask for 100 million yuan? Why? Is my precious granddaughter not worth 100 million yuan? Asking this brat for a betrothal gift of 100 million yuan is letting him off easy." "Grandpa." Hearing Lu Xiangyang's words, Lu Zi's face suddenly turned red. She looked at Lu Xiangyang with some embarrassment and anger, and then looked at Qin Chuan. Suddenly, she fell silent and didn't speak. Qin Chuan was a little dumbfounded. Why they talk about betrothal gifts? Seeing the confused look on Qin Chuan's face, Lu Xiangyang coldly snorted and said, "What's wrong? You've been living with my precious granddaughter for 2 months. Don't tell me you two are just roommates. If you really dare to say that, this old man will kill you with a single palm strike, even if it means offending your teacher." Looking at Lu Xiangyang's restless appearance, Qin Chuan really didn't dare to explain anything. He was really afraid that Lu Xiangyang would really kill him with one palm if he got agitated. "Grandpa, actually there's still some secrets in this matter. I still have some things that I haven't solved for the time being." After a moment of silence, Qin Chuan could only brace himself and explain. LV Xiangyang stared at Qin Chuan sinisterly and said, "Why don't you explain to me what you're hiding?" Lu Zi also looked at Qin Chuan curiously, as if she wanted to see how Qin Chuan was going to explain. "Before I advanced to the Qi refining stage, I used to train in the Cloud Dragon Mountain range for a period of time. At that time, something happened." Qin Chuan briefly explained the matter between him and the several big families in Xiang City, and then helplessly said to Lu Xiangyang, "So, you and I carried the status of an engaged couple. At that time, we agreed to end this relationship after graduating from university. As a man, I naturally can't break my promise, right? So you actually have a little lover outside. I might as well kill you." Lu Xiangyang was angry. This kid actually had a fiancée and still dared to seduce his precious granddaughter. This was simply a scumbag. "Grandpa, you misunderstood. I said that it was just a temporary measure to avoid trouble. Think about it. If I and Zer were together before Yukai and my status was lifted, then when the matter between me and Yukai was exposed in the future, how would others look at me and Zer? And how would they look at you? Am I right? I'm doing this for Zer's sake." Qin Chuan had a headache. Now, he could only use Yukai as a shield. "Then you mean that you and Zer's matter will have to wait until you graduate from university? That is 3 years later?" Lu Xiangyang was suddenly unhappy. If he had known that things were so complicated, he wouldn't have put on this show. "I promise that I will give you a satisfactory explanation 3 years later." Qin Chuan saw that Lu Xiangyang had relented and immediately made a promise. "Humph." Lu Xiangyang coldly snorted, patted his butt, and stood up from the ground, and said to Qin Chuan and Lu Zi, "You young people discuss and solve your own matters. This old man is leaving." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.